spelled Loeb, bar number 173970.
All right, Ms. Weinmiller.
Good morning, Your Honor. Chris Weinmiller with Ms. Brophy. Weinmiller is Winemiller, and my bar number is 863177.
Good morning, Your Honor. Lisa Maxfield, also with Ms. Brophy. My bar number is 844337, and my last name is spelled Maxfield.
All right, I wanted to just take up a few housekeeping matters first. Well, I don't know if that's quite the right term, but I did receive this morning the defense request for a 104 hearing on Michelle Revano. I don't know if I've said that right. But before I address it, I just want to ask the state, have you had a chance to see it? Because I got it at 7 this morning or so.
We did as well, but I have had a chance to review it.
You have, okay.
Yes.
All right, so I want to tell the side sort of, before I hear argument, I want to give both sides my understanding of where we are on this sort of issue globally. I can't remember the original witness that we, I think her name was Miss Light, but we had this issue. I indicated in line with the Carter opinion that I did not think it was appropriate for witnesses to come in and discuss their opinion that Miss Brophy's behavior was odd if what we were talking about was a comparison to how they expect people would normally act, as opposed to a situation where, because of their knowledge of Miss Brophy, they thought it was unusual for her. Now, the Carter opinion, I do want to say, was a pretty aggravated situation in which evidence was admitted that a police officer specifically was comparing the behavior of that defendant with what their expectation was for how a normal person would react. Now, with regards to yesterday, there was a witness, Sergeant McDaniel, who said, and I don't know that I have this verbatim, but essentially said, when asked one of the last questions, what did Miss Brophy say when she was arrested? He said something along the lines of, you guys think or must think I killed my husband. And then he added sort of the editorial comment, I just thought it was odd, or I thought it was odd. So it was either 5 or 6 words, depending on what exactly he said. Now, I will say, defense didn't object. If they had objected, I would have sustained it, and I would have asked the jury to disregard the comment. But I do want to indicate that it's sort of a borderline objection when we're talking about just that one answer, in the sense that it gives the listener no understanding at all of why the officer thought it was odd. Did he think it was odd because it was in comparison to how he thought a quote-unquote innocent person would react? I don't know. I couldn't tell what to make of it. But I think in an abundance of caution, I've made it pretty clear that if those kinds of comments are made and they're not tied to how the witness believes Ms. Brophy normally acts, I'm going to sustain objections to those kinds of comments. Now, with regard, and I will say this, I did not get the impression the state was deliberately trying to elicit that commentary. To me, it sounded like one of these things that a witness says, but I do want to, getting down to what a witness says when they're sometimes not being overly thoughtful about what's allowed and what's not allowed. So when it comes to Ms. Revano, defense has provided sort of a summary of much of what she said in an interview with the state's investigator. I do agree that just reading the summary, there's a number of things that I don't think it would be appropriate for her to say. For example, that she thinks that she was more emotional about Mr. Brophy's loss than Miss Brophy was. She makes a number of comments about how she was more emotional and that she thought Nancy's behavior was odd. I'm not really sure why. So it's a little hard for me to know with regard to those comments. But she makes a comment, there was no empathy, nothing about Dan. The part about there being no empathy, that seems to be something that I would sustain an objection to. She also goes on to just say, I didn't like that she had no emotion and I had all these emotions. I was feeling internal conflict and it was now awkward. I felt like it affected me more than it affected her. And I would have liked to hear some compassion about her husband. Statements along these lines, I do think would be inappropriate. I guess the reason I'm going into such detail about this right now is I'm not sure whether or not there's a need for a 104 hearing, in the sense that if both sides are in agreement that these kind of statements are inappropriate and that the state will instruct the witness not to make these kinds of statements, then I don't see what the value of a 104 hearing is. However, if the state does think that some of these statements are properly admissible, then we might well have to have a 104 hearing. So I guess I'll just ask the state what their position is with regard to Miss Revano and what she might say.
Yes, Your Honor. So I think on several of these that you identified, I had also identified as ones that would be inappropriate comments from the witness. And I have already spoken with this witness, just like I did with Miss Light, about making these types of comments and how they are not going to be permitted. And that, of course, further instruction of just answer the questions. I'm not going to be asking you questions about these things. So there should be no reason to provide that type of answer. I've already instructed Ms. Revano to that. Where I would like to add to what Your Honor has said is that comments like, I was more emotional than she was, I would think, depending on how the testimony actually comes out, that her commenting on her own emotional state is perfectly appropriate. That I was very upset about this, hearing about Dan's death. And then a comment about when she had personal interaction with Nancy, that Nancy didn't show any emotion. Without further commenting on whether that was weird to her or whether she thought that Nancy must be guilty because she's not reacting the way that she's expecting. I agree with that additional commentary, and it's that specifically I instructed her not to do. But the pointing out facts and things that she's observing is not what the Carter opinion is about.
Well, I agree. I guess where the problem lies, and maybe we do need a 104 hearing, is that whether or not you believe someone has emotion is, in my mind, an opinion. Someone can be very calm outwardly and have all sorts of emotions internally.
Sure.
So if you're talking about things that are readily observable, that might be admissible, but things that are not readily observable, such as a person's emotional state, I would tend to disagree.
Sure, and I think the way that the question would probably have to be asked to avoid that situation, because I do agree with that, is something along the lines of, was she crying when, things that are physically happening to her? Did Nancy say anything about how she was feeling? I think those would be appropriate. I agree that just a general, she was not emotional, is probably not really all that helpful. And I don't know that it necessarily crosses the line, but I think it's probably getting closer to drawing out those conclusions. But I think comments on whether she was crying, whether she was, in Miss Revano's particular situation, she appears to be pretty good friends with Nancy. And I think that what she's going to say is that she seemed like her old self. She was just carrying on, and I didn't notice a difference in her from before Dan's death and after Dan's death. And she's contrasting that with her own feelings of, this moment in time devastated me and still has to this day. And what she noticed in Nancy being close friends with her is that there was no difference. I think that that's what she would say.
All right, let me turn to defense. I want to sort of broadly ask two questions. The first question is whether or not, and it's fine either way, you agree that the state could ask questions such as, was she crying, not was she emotional? The other types of things Mr. Overstreet was discussing, or do you think that those would be objectionable as well?
Your Honor, Ms. Revano, first of all, just to set some context, is primarily the hairdresser for our client and Mr. Brophy before he passed. She's talking about an interaction here that they had on July 6th, which is about 5 weeks after Mr. Brophy passed. So I think that it's important for the court to consider the value of her observations at that point in time. I don't know many people who are still crying 5 weeks after a loss. I think most people struggle not to be crying in public in a hair salon 5 weeks after a loss like that. So I don't even understand really how that's relevant. Did she say anything about how she was feeling? It seems to me that that is asking for a comment on a negative. In other words, it is a comment. She should have been crying then. Most people would be crying then. She was not. So it does seem to me that that's a very indirect way of getting exactly at what the court is trying to prohibit. And I realize this is not directly responsive to the questions the court asked, but with respect to yesterday and Detective Sergeant McDaniel's testimony, I think he was only asked a couple of questions, and he was asked a follow-up question about the statement that our client made. But we don't want to find ourselves in the position of having to object in front of the jury and drawing more attention. He's a detective sergeant. I mean, he certainly should have been able to absorb that instruction had it been given to him, and we just want to avoid a situation where we're constantly asking the jury to get up and leave, or having to address a problem that was readily avoidable in advance.
I agree. I mean, so there's a number of ways, there's a number of ways I can deal with these things. I can jump in if neither side is objection, and we've already discussed the topic, which I believe is clearly objectionable, but it can cut both ways. There was some testifying during defense questioning yesterday, which part of it was objected to and part of it wasn't. So I guess what I'm asking, Ms. Weinmiller, is, if defense wants, and a comment like that were to come out, even though I'm instructing the state to now instruct its witnesses not to make comments like that, I'm happy to jump in and ask the jury to disregard that last comment, even without an objection. But by the same token, I'm happy to jump in if I think counsel is testifying, and tell counsel not to do that. My approach so far has been not to do anything unless one of the sides objects. So, what would your preference be when it comes to these kinds of issues?
Your Honor, I think we would prefer the latter, and it seems to me that even though it is cumbersome to hold a 104 hearing, at least highlighting this and having a discussion in advance makes it much less likely that there'll be the need for the court to do that.
So what would the 104 hearing be for, though? I mean, if both sides are essentially in agreement as to what, except for the one comment, the one question, did she say anything about what she is feeling? And I might actually agree with you on that. But other than that question,
if we've resolved all of that, including that, we don't need to actually go over it with her as far as we're concerned.
okay. I do think that's getting pretty close, that particular question. If you want to ask what they talked about, that's fine. But I won't allow, we're talking about 5 weeks later, asking a question of the witness, well, did she talk about her sorrow or what she was feeling? If you want to just broadly ask what she talked about, that's fine.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay. And this is not the first witness this morning, right?
It is.
It is the first witness. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to talk with your witness. I know you already did, but just to make sure she understands.
Will do.
And then something came up this morning, which we don't have to resolve right now. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. But my understanding is that the state does think it's going to end today?
That's the plan.
Okay, may or may not. But in any event, this week at some point, maybe.
Yes, I think if we don't finish today, it would just be part of the day tomorrow.
Okay, and then I think defense has brought up that they might actually have some witnesses ready next week. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, we were not expecting that there would be that much of a gap. We were thinking it would just be a couple of days. If it's going to stretch into calendar days, what's 10 days or so, we would, of course, be motivated to try to put something together for next week. We've talked with some experts about whether we could do Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. It looks like that probably will work. we're a little impeded by the fact that we've got 3 investigators who are sick, including one with COVID. So we don't have a lot of people who can help us make those arrangements outside of, during the workday when we're here in court. But it looks to me like if the court is still available, if the prosecutors are available, we probably can do Tuesday and Wednesday of next week.
Okay, so a few ifs there. I don't know if you all are available or not, and you may not know either. It's fine, we can take this up later if need be. Do you know if you're available next week?
Judge, this is the first I'm hearing about witnesses. I mean, defense was the one that filed the motion asking for a hard
I
start
know,
date of May 2nd.
I'm aware.
And they've known our schedule from day one. They knew there was gonna be a week gap. We fully explained that, we discussed it.
That was discussed on the record when the motion was made. I'm not trying to point fingers or blame anyone here. I'm just asking you to look into whether or not you'd be ready next week. If you're not, you're not. Defense did make a motion to have a hard start of May 2nd. There was discussion during that motion that it might result in a week or longer of a gap in the trial. And defense did just say they're qualifying it if you're available. So all I'm asking is if we don't know the answer right now, let's see if we can figure it out. If you don't know till tomorrow, that's fine too, but just something to look into.
Sure, and I do know that I could not answer that right now.
Okay,
But I would ask for more information from the defense.
okay.
Because we have no idea who these witnesses are, and we have, if they're not committed to a specific day, I can't check my availability. So
Well, I think Tuesday and Wednesday is what I just heard.
you're gonna have enough witnesses for 2 days?
We're trying to.
So they may not know yet either. So no one knows for sure. I guess this is something we'll just have to take up later.
I think so, and it just, that's all my request is just, can we know who these people are? Especially if they're experts, because we may need to prepare for that. And lock down what days they are so that we can schedule appropriately, but we'll do our best to.
Sure, I'll let the sides talk, and whenever it makes sense to have further discussion on this, we can. Maybe that's today, maybe it's not today, but just something that both sides can look into. So with that, why don't we, is there anything else then before we bring the jury in?
You had said that
Yes,
you
I
to
wanted to have you step out and talk with the witness. Why don't we do that? Yeah, let's go off the record. Seated, everyone? State ready for its next witness.
Yes, sure. Excuse me. Your Honor, the state will call Michelle Revano.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see what she is. Ms. Revano, we're going to have you come up and step on into the witness box, but if you can stay standing for just a moment, my clerk will give you an oath. So why don't you go ahead and step back? Yeah, just real close to the chair. Perfect.
Please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, then you may be seated and you may remove your mask. And then, because we're being recorded, I'll please ask you to state and spell your first and last name.
Okay, Michelle Revano, Michelereveneau.
All right, and Ms. Revano, there is water there if you want any. And whenever the state is ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Revano,
Yes.
are you friends, or were you friends with Nancy Brophy?
Yes, yeah, kind of. She was my client.
Okay. And how long have you known Ms. Brophy?
It's been 20 some years.
From now?
Yes,
Okay.
she hired my son. She had a catering business and she hired my son to work with her, to help with her. So he was 15 at the time.
Okay. And how were you acquainted with Ms. Brophy back then?
My son worked for her, and at some point, I don't remember when, she became my client.
Okay. So your son went to work for her first, and that's how you met her?
Yes,
Okay. And that was 22, 23 years ago, something like that?
yeah.
Okay. And then you said at some point she became your client. What is it that you do for work?
I'm a hairdresser.
And so at some point, over time, Ms. Brophy came to you to get her hair done?
Yep.
Okay. Do you remember about how long ago that started?
I don't. I would say maybe 3 to 5 years after we had met.
Okay. So leading up to 2018, let's see if my math is right, would that mean you were doing her hair for 12 to 14 years, somewhere in there?
Mhm.
Okay. And at some point, did Daniel Brophy start coming to you to get his hair cut as well?
Yes.
And did that happen around the same time that Nancy started coming to you, or was that later? Do
No, later.
you remember about how much later?
Couple years maybe.
Did you spend any time with Nancy Brophy outside of just cutting her hair?
No, not really.
You
No.
never had dinners or anything together?
Yeah, we had dinner at their home. I think that was probably about the time I met Dan. I think we had dinner there with another couple. And then they had a fire in the house or whatever, and redid the kitchen. And it was kind of in the summer, a gathering for that. And I invited them to our dinner club. My husband and I are with a group of couples and have a dinner group. So I had invited them one time for that.
And did they come to that?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So besides, it sounds like maybe an occasional dinner,
Mhm.
anything beyond that? Did you take any trips together, anything like that?
No.
Okay. Did you ever, besides the occasional dinner at their house, did you ever spend any time over at the Brophy home?
No, not unless we were invited there for something, but no.
Okay. And then did you all ever go out to eat together, go to restaurants or anything like that?
Well, we would go to the school that Dan taught at, the culinary, and then I think it was the horsemaker there. And then also, we have a couple girlfriends who opened up a restaurant in Portland 14 years ago. And they had suggested we invite Dan and Nancy for dinner. And for the dinner, the opening, it was just close friends because they knew half of their staff probably knew Dan, Chef Dan Brophy.
I see.
And they did, whether they were in the kitchen or serving or, yeah.
That was about 14 years ago, do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. And so leading up to September 5th of 2018, was Nancy a regular customer of yours?
Yes.
Okay. About how often did she come see you?
I'd say an average 6 to 8 weeks. It's 6 to 8 weeks.
Was she pretty consistent over the years with that?
Yeah.
Okay. And what about Dan Brophy? Did he have a pretty regular schedule, or is that a little bit more hit or miss?
Yeah. Kind of hit and miss. I think probably the last couple of years he came in a little bit more regularly, maybe every 6 weeks, 7 weeks, possibly. Yeah.
And did you get to know Nancy Brophy very well over the years with her coming to see you every 6 weeks or so?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Did she ever share any personal, topics with you?
No, I don't know. Talked about so much. Nancy and I like to gab.
Okay.
So we talked a lot.
And what maybe that's too broad of a question, but did she talk about her work, what she was doing at the time over the years?
Yes, she been in some type of food industry for a while. My son worked for her again with Nathaniel at Port of Portland building. There was like a little breakfast and lunch place, and my
Was
son.
that after the catering business? Sorry.
Yeah.
So you were aware she had this catering business your son worked for her, and then she had like a little deli or something like that she was running, and your son also worked for her there?
Yes.
Okay. And what about after kind of the food scene that she was involved in? Were you aware that she was involved in selling insurance, life insurance, Medicare, things like that?
Yes.
Okay. And
She had approached my husband and I, and gosh, I can't remember, but I think we signed up for something. I think it was life insurance, or
Okay.
no, maybe my husband thought it was health insurance for him first because he hit retirement before me.
oh, I
So,
see.
Yeah.
But you think you might have purchased a life insurance policy through Nancy?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you recall how many life insurance policies you purchased
No,
through?
I'm sure just the one.
Do you recall whether or not she advised you on that you would need more than just one life insurance policy?
No.
Did she ever discuss with you her life insurance policies and what she thought was appropriate for her?
I mean, she might have maybe in suggesting for us what to buy and what not to buy, but no.
And I suppose maybe that's what I was suggesting the context might be. And when talking to you about what might be appropriate for yourself, do you recall whether she mentioned what she was carrying on herself or Daniel Brophy?
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. Now you said you knew Nancy was in the catering business at some point. Did you also help her get jobs? Did you end up referring her to somebody for some catering?
Yes.
And what was that about?
As a holiday catering, and it was one of my clients at their home.
Okay. Did you do that anymore, or was that just kind of a one-time thing?
I can't remember. It seems to me the family hired her again for some reason. I'm thinking, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
I don't remember.
And I've been asking you about how well you kind of got to know Nancy over the years, and things that she was into. Were you also aware that she was a writer?
Mm-hmm.
Did she talk about that?
A little bit.
Did she actually give you a book at some point, one of her books?
She had suggested.
Oh, suggested. Not, she didn't give you a book, but she told you about a book that she wrote?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And did you read that book?
I did.
Just in general, what kind of was the genre of that book?
I I kind of liked the book. It was about a single woman and protecting herself. I believe it was like in New Mexico or Texas or something, but I liked the character and the story was pretty good, and a relationship with the bad guy, and it was more of a modern day, book. It was kind of a quick read, enjoyable.
Okay. Do you recall in that book or anything else you might have read of hers that she discussed, that she wrote about guns, firearms, anything like that? I know you're shaking your head, but we're
No.
recording. Okay.
No.
Thank you. Now, like I said, I've been asking you a little bit about how well you got to know Nancy Brophy. Over the years, did you get to know Dan Brophy very well?
Mm-hmm.
Was he a pretty open book right from the get-go, or what was that like?
Yeah, it was a little bit harder, but once I found subject matters that we both enjoyed talking about, then it was easier.
Yeah, what do you mean by that, harder and finding subject matters you both cared about?
Well, we talked about mostly food and gardening.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of stick to conversations I knew that he would enjoy, and I would possibly learn from Dan with gardening and different recipes, and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything, I mean, outside of those two subjects, food and gardening, or
Yeah.
cooking and gardening, was there much more substance to the conversations that you two had?
No.
Did he share anything personal about his life?
No, sometimes about Nathaniel, his son. But no, not too much, not too much personal.
How did you hear about Dan's death?
I read it in the Sunday paper. It was a little blurb. Excuse me.
Take your time.
It was in the Sunday paper, and it was about this big. And I think it was Sunday morning, and I had texted Nancy, oh my gosh, I'm reading the paper, what happened? I hope everything's okay. I hope Dan's okay. I'm so sorry. That was it.
And I want to clarify what you were reading in the paper. So when you say Sunday, are you talking about the morning after the shooting at the school?
Mhm.
Okay. And what were you reading? Were you reading about the shooting or about Dan's death?
There's nothing about Dan.
Okay.
It was just a shooting at the culinary school,
Okay.
and it was not very big. It was very small. I don't even know how I saw it. It was pretty small.
Okay. And that's when you texted Nancy. And could you tell us again what you had texted her?
I just read about it. I hope everyone's okay. I hope Dan's okay. Let me know, whatever. Just because there wasn't much.
Sure.
It was just a shooting at the school.
Did Nancy reply to that text?
She did.
What did that say?
Dan was the victim.
Did she elaborate on that at all, or was that it?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was it.
Were you aware of a vigil that was being held for Dan Brophy in the coming days after the shooting?
Yes.
Did you go to that vigil?
I could not.
You couldn't make it, or?
It was just too emotional. I couldn't go.
After Dan's death, did you see Nancy again?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall when that was?
It was towards the end of July. She came in for an appointment with her niece, actually.
came in to have her hair done? Now, you said she normally kept a schedule of about every 6 weeks. I think you said sometimes up to 8 weeks. And if that's wrong, feel free to correct me. Before that late July appointment, when was the last time you saw her, do you think?
Oh, I just looked in my books. It was June, May or June. I was just looking through it. It was a good 6 to 8 weeks prior, so that would have put her in June. No, May.
Okay.
May. Shoot, I just looked at it. I just didn't
No,
think
that's
that it
okay.
would be relevant, so.
We're sort of speaking generally here, but I just want to make sure we understand that
Right.
Dan's death was on June 2nd, 2018. So do you think that appointment before the July one was before or after that?
It was the one prior was in, I believe, in May.
Okay. And then I guess that might work with your time frame of up to 8 weeks, and you're saying later in July. Okay. So was that to you sort of on schedule? I mean, within that 6 to 8 weeks, it was outside of it, or what do you mean?
Just out the time, that she probably, if it was between 6 and 8 weeks, yeah.
Okay, maybe I asked a bad question. I
Okay.
apologize. I guess what I'm asking you, was that a normal amount of time for Nancy?
I think so.
Okay. It wasn't delayed further, or she didn't try to come in sooner or anything like that? Okay. And so you said that she came in to have her hair done and that she came in with her niece?
Yeah, her niece was here from Texas.
Was her niece also getting her hair done?
Yes, one of my coworkers, I was able to get a coworker who was available to do her niece's hair.
Okay. When you first saw Nancy, how did you address her? Do you recall?
Yes.
Could you describe that, please?
Well, I gave her a hug and told her how sorry I was, and I was really sad. Obviously, I'm sorry. And I asked, what happened? Because again, there'd been nothing in the paper. And asked what happened. And I knew he had been there to teach a class. And I said, was somebody there, when he got there? Was it open or whatnot? And she had said that, the garage door was open and that the janitor, who usually works Saturdays, had taken that day off, so he wasn't there.
Your Honor, I think we have to make a hearsay objection here.
It's the comment of your
Well,
client.
the basis of the statement that she's relaying.
I'm understanding she's relaying what your client said. So,
I think we can address it on cross.
all right. So overruled.
And I don't know, did you finish what you were saying before the objection? Okay. So Nancy told you that the garage door was open? Okay. And that the person that she thought was supposed to maybe be working that morning wasn't there that day? Okay. Did she elaborate further? I mean, you said that you were asking her what had happened. She gives you kind of those two facts. Did she elaborate further about what she thought had happened?
No. She just, I don't know if it's what she saw or what she was told. Those are just the two things in regards to supposedly what the school looked like.
Okay. So she didn't elaborate how she knew those things, is what you're trying to say?
No.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you. Now, when you were first addressing her, and you told her how sorry you were, how did you feel at that moment?
Kind of the way I feel now, really sad. Shocked, obviously shocked. And it was a difficult appointment.
You first were talking to her, were you crying? Did you cry?
I did.
And while you were talking to Miss Brophy at that time, was she crying?
No.
During that appointment, did Nancy talk about her plans with you, what she was going to do?
Mm. She talked about cleaning the house, cleaning out the house, and that I guess Dan collected change. There's change in his pockets and change in some, I remember a couple bags of dried beans or whatever. She found changes in there. And she had mentioned that one of the neighbors possibly was interested in the house. It's got a nice big lot. And that she'd been looking at condos.
And so, again, this is late July, and she's telling you that she has a neighbor that was interested in buying the home.
She thought she had a neighbor that would be interested.
Was she talking about any need for listing the home, or did it sound like she was relying on this neighbor to buy the house?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just a neighbor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did she elaborate on what she thought the house was worth, or what she planned on selling it to the neighbor for, or anything like that?
Mm-mm.
Now, had she talked about selling the house to you before Dan had passed away?
It seemed like they were maybe looking to make a change, either get another piece of property or move out. I don't know. You know, Dan had never mentioned it. Nancy had. So I don't know if it was like wanting a bigger house, maybe more land, maybe less land. Yeah.
Did you feel like you really got a straight answer from Nancy as to what she was looking forward to doing?
No.
You said Dan had never mentioned anything about selling the house to you.
Never mentioned anything about moving. No.
Did Nancy ever talk to you, and maybe it's in the same context of selling the home, maybe not, but did she talk to you about her desire to retire?
Yes and no. I mean, I think Nancy and I had a lot of conversations going on, you know, and yeah, I think she was right. I think she was ready. I think she was ready to retire. I don't think Dan was. So
Did Dan ever talk about wanting to retire?
no, I think Nancy had mentioned, you know, that she was ready to retire, and you know, Dan loves his school, and you know, blah blah blah. I mean, yeah, just.
Did you get the impression?
I just want to instruct the jury on one thing. Given the answer that Dan hadn't mentioned retiring, the jury can consider that comment, but I'm going to ask the jury to strike consideration of the comment that she thought Dan did or did not want to retire. So go ahead.
And so, Ms. Revano, in speaking with Nancy about the topic of retirement, I think you started to say this, and maybe it was when you said something da-da-da. I want to go back to that a little bit. Was Nancy telling you about whether or not Dan was ready to retire?
It came up once. It came up in one of the conversations.
And what did she tell you about Dan?
He wasn't ready to retire.
Did Nancy ever just in these conversations, and maybe that happened over time, in these conversations with Nancy, did she discuss with you an actual retirement plan?
No,
She didn't discuss with you her and Dan's 4-part plan to retirement?
no,
Had you ever heard that before?
no,
Did Nancy ever talk to you about Dan's, not just his desire to retire or not, but also what she thought Dan thought about selling the house? Did she
No.
ever talk about that?
no.
You said that Nancy Brophy talked to you about looking into the possibility of buying a condo. Did she elaborate on that anymore?
No, just that last appointment that, no, that she was looking at some condos in Portland.
Any specific location that she was looking at?
Down on front, the river, wherever they're being built there. So what is that, First or Front or,
No, I couldn't tell you. I don't know, but yeah, it's somewhere along the river.
yeah,
Okay. Did she talk about how she? Well, did she ever talk to you about her finances?
no,
So she didn't elaborate on how she was going to be able to afford a waterfront condo.
no,
And did Nancy ever confide in you anything, I guess, about her and Dan's relationship?
no. I had a good, I mean, I thought they had a good relationship.
Sure.
Yeah.
Not a lot of personal details, though.
Mm.
Okay. I apologize. I'm just looking at my notes here and make sure I'm covering everything. Just final topic. Did Nancy ever talk to you about firearms at all?
Mm-mm. Oh, no,
Okay. Did she ever disclose to you that she owned a firearm?
no,
Do you yourself recall speaking with Nancy about your experience with firearms or anything like that?
nope,
She never inquired about your ownership of firearms or
don't own
knowledge?
one, don't own one.
Thank you, Ms. Revano. I don't think I have any other questions at this time.
Okay,
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Revano.
good morning.
So, Mr. Overstreet had asked you kind of a loaded question. He asked you whether,
Objection.
I'm going to ask you to rephrase that question. Let's not comment on each other's
Mr.
questioning styles.
Mr. Overstreet asked you whether you were able to get a straight answer out of Nancy Brophy about the retirement plans and plans to sell the house. Do you recall that?
Retirement plans. I never had a conversation with Nancy about retirement plans.
Okay. Is it safe to say, or would it be accurate to say that you had conversations with Nancy every 6 to 8 weeks or so?
Mm-hmm.
And as you would talk with her, she would describe plans that were in flux. She would talk with you about sort of how they were developing plans.
No, not necessarily. Probably about her business, whether it was the catering or one of the other businesses, or maybe one of her books, or, it's always a different conversation. There wasn't many conversations about anything personal. Usually they were, I had a short question, she had a short answer, we moved on.
Okay, all right. And you also responded to a question saying that you thought that Nancy and Dan Brophy had a good relationship.
Mhm.
Do you recall talking with Detective Merrill in September of 2018? You remember a phone interview he did with you?
A Merrill?
Detective Merrill.
You'll have to give me some more information than that.
Okay, here, I've got a transcript of it. Part highlighted in pink is what I'd like to ask you about. Don't read that out loud. I just
Okay.
want you to have it for context.
Okay.
Do you remember describing to Detective Merrill back in September of 2018 that in your eyes you thought they had a really wonderful relationship?
I don't know how to use wonderful. I probably said they had a good relationship, but if
Okay,
I said wonderful, then
do you agree this is a transcript though?
yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
All right, and was that your opinion in September of 2018 that they had had a wonderful relationship?
2018 in September. Well, they didn't have much of a relationship by September.
That they had had,
That they had
right, a really wonderful relationship,
prior.
right,
Yes. Mhm.
okay, right. And you also told Detective Merrill that they had expressed neither of them had expressed to you any difference of opinion about selling the house?
It was never a conversation I ever had with Dan. Conversations with Dan were limited, like I said, you know.
But you did describe him as having a twinkle in his eye and a wonderful sense of humor?
Mhm.
Okay. And you also told Detective Merrill that neither of them had confided in you about any sort of struggle, financial struggle or other struggle?
No.
I have nothing further, thank you.
Yeah, redirect.
Yeah, so Ms. Revano, you just talked about that sometimes you would discuss the current book that Ms. Brophy was working on.
Not too often.
Okay, I thought one of your answers just now was that sometimes the conversation would include what she's currently writing.
Yeah, but not for me, not anything that was memorable, I guess, is what I'm saying. I don't remember. We probably had the conversation, but probably nothing that obviously stuck. I couldn't tell you the name of the book or.
Sure, yeah, I'm not gonna ask you a name
Yeah.
of the book. I'm more interested in the topics.
Oh,
Did she discuss with you a current book that she was working on, something about witches?
no.
Before that, perhaps, maybe going back a little bit further, did she talk to you about a book where she had purchased a ghost gun build kit in order to do research for a book she was working on?
No.
Your Honor, this is well beyond anything we asked her about. This is
Topic
not
was-
read.
The topic was books she was working
Well,
on.
I've heard. Both sides have brought up that they may have had some discussion about books, so I'll allow the question.
Ms. Revano, I think your answer was no, is that correct? Okay, you're shaking your head yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I just.
The answer was no?
No.
Okay, I don't have any further questions, Judge.
Must be excused
For the state, yes.
for defense. All right, you can step down.
And the state will call Tonya Medlin, and I'll just need a brief moment to touch base as I'm on my way.
Okay. Sure.
We're going to go ahead and go off record for the time being.
Well, I guess we'll be back. Ms.
Let me go
Medlin,
back on record, Judge.
Ms. Medlin, we're going to come and have you stand in the witness box here, but don't sit just yet.
Aye,
We'll have my clerk give you an oath.
You to please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
yes.
Okay, then you may be seated, and you may remove your mask. And then because we're being recorded, I'll please ask you to state and spell your first and last name.
It's Tonya Medlin, Tania, last name is Medlin.
And Ms. Medlin, why don't we have you take your mask all the way off just while you're testifying? And there is water there if you want any,
Okay.
but whenever the state's ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Medlin. Yep, I'm over here. And Ms. Medlin, I can see from your jacket a little bit, but how are you currently employed?
I'm a certified dietary matter with Prestige Care.
And so do you work as a chef?
Kitchen manager, I do nutritional assessments, interview patients. I oversee a team.
Okay. And prior to this location, where did you work previously?
Avamere Health Systems.
And where is that?
Their corporate office is in Wilsonville, but I worked at the Beaverton location.
All right. And were you doing the same sort of thing that you're doing now?
Yes.
All right. And I want to talk to you a little bit about Dan and Nancy Brophy. Were you friends with them?
Yes.
And collectively, how long have you known them?
A long time. 25, 30 years.
Okay. And let's kind of take each of them. We'll start with Dan Brophy. How did you meet Dan Brophy, and what context did you know him?
I met him briefly at the culinary school as an instructor, and then later became friends with him through his wife, Nancy.
And so would that have been Western Culinary at the time?
I believe it was Western Culinary. It hadn't transferred over yet.
To Le Cordon Bleu?
Correct.
Okay. And so did you attend culinary school there?
I did.
Okay.
I went 89 to 90.
Okay. And he was one of your instructors?
No, he was not.
He was just an instructor?
He came after I graduated.
Gotcha. All right. And so then did you kind of lose touch with him until you got reacquainted after knowing Nancy Brophy?
It's not that we got reacquainted. Let me be clear. I knew of him in the culinary world. He was another chef. I didn't formally meet him and become friends with him until him and Nancy.
All right. And so how did you meet Nancy Brophy?
Nancy was my roommate when she went to culinary school. She went to Western after I'd graduated. And I usually went through housing to get my roommates. And they would, match us up with people. And so I believe Nancy came to me from, I want to say, Colorado. She moved in with me.
And how long were the two of you roommates?
A year, about a year.
And so that would have been in the early 90s?
It was either 91 to 90 to 91 or 91 to 92. It was somewhere right in there. It was after I graduated.
All right. And after you and Ms. Brophy were roommates, I take it you stayed friends?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And how would you describe, your friendship? In what capacity? You see each other on occasion? Good friends?
Nancy for a long time. Somebody I looked up to, she was one of my closest, dearest friends. I worked for her in her catering company. And when I didn't have a job, she gave me one. When she needed a chef, I found an excuse to go work for her. So, yeah.
And so how long did that continue? The entire time she had her business?
Off and on for the better of 12 years, probably.
So kind of in between, if she needed help or you needed a job, you'd find your way.
And it
there.
wasn't just the catering company. I worked over at the novitiates too, the Jesuit priests. So, which also crossed with Dan.
Okay. And so then when did you get to know Dan Brophy better, or them as a couple?
I got to know Dan Brophy way better once he came to work for me at Avamere. Because we were, 8 hours a day on top of each other.
And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. When was that?
Okay, so 18, 17, I want to say, worked for me for about a year and a half. I want to say started in 2016.
Okay. And like I said, we'll jump back to
I
that.
could be, it could be, it could have been a little bit later, maybe. I don't know. It was like, I was there for 6.5 years. He worked for me for about 1.5 years.
Okay. Prior to his death.
Correct.
Okay. And so in the time when Nancy and Dan Brophy entered into a relationship and then got married, did you stay friends with Nancy during that whole period?
Oh, yeah.
And so how often would you see either just Nancy or Nancy and Dan? What did that relationship look like?
We'd have the occasional dinner, go to their place, they'd come to our place. Nancy and I did a lot more together than Dan and I did, obviously. Coffee, we go to coffee. I'd call her if I had, fighting with my husband, I'd call her and, whine and cry. And she'd be like, it's not a battle you want to pick. So, yeah, no, it was, there was also, a year or two that we probably didn't talk, and that wasn't for any other reason other than I'm busy, she's busy, but we never missed a beat. Those friends that get together and you just were what you were, you just don't miss a beat. So.
And did you stay that way even as she and Dan got married? Sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
The couples did things together.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't every week or every month. It was, a few times a year.
And did you know Dan Brophy through the culinary world before he came to work at Avamere?
I knew of him.
Okay.
From the fish house, Cooch Street Fish House.
Okay. And so the real way you knew him was through Nancy and anything you did as a.
Well, Nancy, but students from the school and other chefs from the culinary team, because I was part of the Oregon Culinary team, and they worked at the school. They worked with Dan.
So was there a fair overlap in the culinary world?
We're all connected.
Okay.
It's like the military. We're all brothers.
Okay. All right. And talking specifically about Nancy Brophy, over the years in your conversations with her, it sounds like you were aware of her catering business and worked at that at times.
Yes.
And do you recall when she sold that or that she sold that business?
Oh, I know she sold it, but I'm trying to remember what I know that she sold it because I remember driving over the Ross Island Bridge and seeing the name of it, and I went, "Did you move?" No, I sold it. It was that conversation.
Okay.
So.
And do you recall what she did after that?
Immediately after, I have no idea. I don't know, but I know that eventually she was doing life insurance.
And did she talk to you about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She started my policy.
And so did she, for just you and your husband?
Me and my godson.
Okay. And did she talk to you about like how many policies you should have, give you advice?
No, she gave me advice, of course. Yeah, she gave me I'm enrolled in a very good policy. I have a universal life, and my godson's is good too, and they're both doing well. So, but yeah, no, that's the only policy I have.
Okay. And did she talk to you ever about her own policies or anything like that?
Well, yeah, of course. In describing how it works and how the system works and how policies work, and the fact that Nancy and my husband are the same age, policies for my husband's also former military. So yeah, there was, and she keeps this amount of insurance on her and her husband, thinking about Dan and Medicare, moving into that field. You should think about this for you guys. And yeah.
And do you recall, did she ever tell you like how much life insurance they had or how many policies?
She told me that they had the exact amount on each other. That was smart when you're homeowners. And, my husband and I have 20 years between us. And if something happens to me, he's taken care of. If something happens to him, I don't lose the house.
And as she's talking to you about all this, is she also it sounds like you had pretty extensive conversations about the business.
Yeah.
And were you sort of interested in that, in the life insurance?
Yeah, there was a point where I actually was doing online classes to get into the insurance world because I had back surgery, so I had to step out of the food world for about 1.5 years because of my back. And I actually went with her to North Carolina.
Okay, on a insurance
A conference.
Okay. All right. And did you ever end up going through with that, or did you stay back?
No, I ended up landing a really good. They got a headhunter called me and said we got you a chef job, and I went right back to it.
All right. And in the conversations you had with Nancy, either during that period or in later years, did she ever talk to you about beyond life insurance? Obviously, it sounds like you guys talked about some details about that. Did Nancy ever talk to you about their financial situation?
No, no,
Ever talk to you about any issues with the mortgage or anything like that?
no.
If she had talked to you about that kind of stuff, would you have been able to give advice or assistance?
I would have done whatever I could to help her and Dan.
Is that the kind of thing you would have talked to her about?
Oh yeah, with my life. Oh yeah, if anybody knows me knows I can't keep my mouth shut.
All right. And then talking specifically about Dan Brophy, so you mentioned that he came to work with you at Avamere,
Correct.
and it sounds like about a year and a half before his death.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe sometime late 2016, early
Yeah,
2017.
he was there about a year and a half.
Okay. And how did that come to be?
Well, again, just like I did with roommates, I called the school and wasn't getting anywhere because I usually call and say, send me a student, I need a body. And they just didn't have anybody at the time. And so then I always go to my next connection, which is who do I know in the chef world? So I called Nancy and, hey, can you ask Dan, does he have a student that's looking for work? Because when I worked over in Milwaukee at a different convalescent facility, he had sent me a student that was struggling. And if she came and worked for me, he gave her a set, he gave me a list of what she had achieved, and he would let her pass his class. But it was like extra credit for her. And because she was a student that was struggling. And so she came and she worked for me. She did a phenomenal job and she passed. And so, I would call Nancy periodically and go, if I need staff, and it didn't matter what job, it could, even when she had her catering company, it would be like, hey, I need somebody. Do you have anybody extra? Because we kind of do that in the world of food. And I said, do you know anybody, does Dan have any students looking for work? And she said, well, what do you need? I told her, I said, I need somebody who not only is interested in food, but somebody that cares about the rehab end of it and wants to do better for the patient, because it's a quality of life issue. And I said, it's not just about slapping food out. And I said, we're also going to be moving into the ITSE global standard diets down the road. And I need somebody who wants to learn that. And that's a whole nother thing. And she said, well, what's the pay? I told her it depends anywhere between, 17 and 20 an hour, depending on how knowledgeable they were. And she said, well, I'll send you Dan. And I said, Dan don't want to come work for me. And she says, yeah, Dan, this is something, Dan has extra time on his hand. I said, well, if you think he wants a job, send him on over. And yeah, he showed up the next day.
All right. And then worked for you from
Well,
then
we
on.
talked about the job and I told him what I needed and I told him what I expected. And I was honestly, in all fairness, I was kind of like, he's my level, if not above. So he's going to come work for me. So I was kind of, are you sure? Because there's egos there. And I was like, and he was like, yeah, no. And he came in and he fit right in. The crew loved him. He did a great job. He was a great chef. He's amazing.
And how often did he work? Did it vary, or was
It did. It totally varied. When he worked weeks during the school, he worked weekends and nights for me. And when he worked during the week at the school, he did weekends he did the opposite. When he worked during the week at the school, he did weekends and nights and vice versa.
Right. And so we've heard some testimony about this, but it sounds like, was that like on a set amount of time that it would rotate, like several weeks at a time? And
It was,
switch?
honestly, it was like every 6 months. It was about every 6 months. And he was pretty good about telling me, hey, I need, he was there about a year and a half. And I think he took 2 vacations. He went on, and they weren't long. One was a week and one was just a few days. But yeah, he was very, very good about his schedule. And he would always say to me, I'd be like, hey, can you cover and talk to management, which meant call Nancy. So.
All right. And so then between, it sounds like maybe the 3 of you, you were able to get his schedule worked out pretty consistently.
Yeah.
Okay. And like how many hours was he working? How many days a week?
He worked honestly 2 to 3. And if I had a call in and I called him, sometimes he came in again.
Sounds like always available if he could be.
He was. We have a union at that job. We had a union and there was an extra $6.50 an hour if you showed up for an unscheduled shift. So if I had one and I called him, he would come in, especially if, it was something he could do.
And would you call him directly, or it sounds like sometimes you would call Nancy to get
If
that?
I couldn't get a hold of him, I'd call her. Because sometimes he doesn't answer his phone. Because, he's busy cooking, picking, whatever he's doing. He don't live by his phone in his hand.
And so then you would reach out to
Yeah, I'd
Nancy.
be like,
And-
Nancy, can you
and-
track him down?
okay, and
I
would
need
you
him.
be able to get a hold of her?
Yeah.
All right. And when you were working out scheduling issues, did you deal with Dan or did you deal with Nancy?
Well, I always dealt with Dan first because he's the employee. But if he said to me, if he used the sentence, you need to talk to management, I would then call Nancy. So, but yeah, no, I always went through Dan first because he was the employee.
And it sounds like from what you said earlier that as Dan started working at Avamere, you got to know him personally a bit better. And you talked to him more.
Yeah, because he always had a dry sense of humor. So honestly, in the beginning, I thought he didn't like me. And I'd be like, what's the matter with this guy? And Nancy says, it's just a sense of humor. And so then I'd kind of poke around it. And then eventually, he realized, she of course said something to him, but he realized that I was like on edge because he's a chef too. And I certainly don't want to step on his toes, but I also want to connect with him on a different level here at work. And so he started doing things like, he knew I liked the Grateful Dead. He knew I liked, that classic 70s rock. So if I was, mad stomping around the kitchen about whatever, he'd start singing. And he'd always pick something that he knew I liked. And I look over him and he's trying, and he did his best not to smile. Like he had this smirk. I don't know. It was just this Brophy look. And you just knew, okay, yeah, he's okay.
All right. As you got to talk to him more, did he talk to you about like personal stuff or more?
It depends. He didn't come out and talk to me about personal things, but if I said something to him, asked him a question, he would certainly give me an example or lead into something. So yeah, we sort of, but not him. He didn't start it.
Over time, did it get where
Oh,
you could
yeah.
ask him more and he'd
Yeah.
be more forthcoming?
Yeah.
Did he ever talk to you? Did he ever talk to you about their financial situation or anything like that?
No, we never really talked money. It was more food. There was a conversation about his son. There was, things like that.
And it sounds like you've described kind of his schedule, his ability to come in. He was a pretty consistent guy.
Oh yeah.
What about in terms of like his sort of everyday approach to things? Was it sort of always the same? Did
Yes.
he do things differently?
No, he was, I swear the man should have been in the military. He was exactly the same. This is what he did. And he always put his knife kit in the same spot. He always put his tea in the same spot. When he was done with his cutting board, his knives were laid a certain way. He was very serious about that.
Other things like personal items or things that you always put in the same places?
Yes.
Like what?
Like his knife kit, like his jacket, he didn't just throw things. He would put it in the same spot every day. So. Yeah.
What about like personal belongings when he came to work? Money, wallet, keys, things like that.
His money was never in his wallet. That's a Brophy thing. He always kept he was right-handed, so he kept his small bills in his right pocket and his big bills in his left. Because he was always wheeling and dealing things for the food carts. He always wore cargo pants, the pockets on the side, and he always kept his money there. Because I have asked him for change, and he's never pulled out his wallet. Like, can you break a 20? He's digging in his pockets. Yeah, he never kept money in his wallet. Not that I have never ever seen.
And what about like timing, parking? Was he kind of always on time?
Always on time, if not early. If he was late, I usually knew in advance. And it was usually because he got held up at school. But yeah, and he always parked in the back parking lot.
And so it sounds like sometimes was there overlap between working at Avamere and working at the
Sometimes,
school?
yeah, sometimes. And sometimes, my PM cook shift started earlier, but Dan was really good at what Dan did. And he didn't need to come in at 12:30. He could come in at 2:00 every day and put dinner out by 5:30 and clean up and go home and be done by 7. So he was a labor budget dream.
So because of his skill set and experience, faster and more efficient than
Oh yeah.
someone newer.
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like he was willing to kind of jump in and work quite a bit if needed.
Yeah, he was a great guy. He was a great help, a good employee.
Did he ever talk to you, did Dan specifically ever talk to you about retirement?
No, not retirement so much, but I never really, we talked about mushrooms. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to, you know, he loved hunting mushrooms and he wanted more time for that.
He never indicated to you that he needed to slow down at Avamere or anything like that?
No,
Anything related to the stop teaching or anything at the Culinary
Oh.
Institute?
he loved his students. No, that was the one thing you could get him talking about was we, had an employee who went out fishing, came back with a bunch of trout, apparently doesn't eat fish, comes into the kitchen, says, "Hey boss, you want some trout?" "Sure, I'll take some trout." "Dan, what do I do with this?" "Let's smoke it." Like, it was his thing. He loved anything new. Yeah.
And what about Nancy Brophy? Did she ever talk to you about retirement?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what did she tell you about?
She talked about them traveling, but they traveled, they spent, God, I don't know, 6-8 weeks, something like that in the Orient. Brought me back a whole bunch of things. It was kind of cool. I know that he had a really good knowledge of that type of cuisine, and which I have none. That's not my background. And so anytime that would happen at work, he was the go-to guy, and like he loved it. He loved that type of cuisine. So I know that he liked traveling. I know because, and I think he liked traveling, and what he said to me was he enjoyed learning about the different cuisines in different places. That's what I know, because that's what he said.
And did Nancy ever talk to you about a plan for retirement specifically or next steps?
Well, she had said that they had planned on eventually downsizing because they didn't need such a big house. You know, they talked about, or she talked to me about that, yeah, that they had talked, or she had told me that they had planned on downsizing the house and retiring and getting something smaller so they didn't have to take care of so much.
Why don't we take our morning break and be back on the record at 10 till 11.
All rise.
All right, please be seated. And if you'd like to continue.
Thank you, Your
Sure.
Honor. And Ms. Medlin, right before the break, I think that we were talking about sort of what Nancy told you about plans for the future. You mentioned a plan to downsize. Did she tell you give you any specifics about what that looked like?
Not definite answers, no, just, smaller place to live, that they wanted to travel.
No, like clear specifics on like what they were going to do with the house they lived in, where they would move, anything like that.
Well, they talked about a lot of things, but nothing was, this is what we're doing.
Okay. And did you ever get the impression that they were going to like move away, or it sounds like you're saying stay there but travel?
They talked about both, or I should say Nancy and I they talked about both.
Okay. So Nancy told you that she and Dan had talked about
Correct.
stuff. You didn't talk to Dan about this.
No.
All right. And sticking with conversations that you'd had with Nancy, did you and Nancy ever discuss firearms in any capacity?
Briefly, yes.
Okay. And do you recall when that would have been?
It was, it was October and November, the Christmas before he died, like before that Christmas.
So,
And it was because it was something my husband and I were interested in, so I'm the one that brought it up.
okay. So would that have been the fall of 2017?
Correct.
Okay. So sometime before Christmas.
It was, yeah, and it was October, November, somewhere in there. I wasn't really paying attention.
Okay. And so what was your and your husband's plan, and what did you brought up?
Okay, so my husband being 20 years older than me, we really don't need anything. And I was trying to come up every year with a plan for us, something that we can buy as a family gift. I also had guardianship of my cousin's child at the time, and she is brought up in a family with target practice. And so Dan and my husband grew up with guns. And so I said to him, would it be okay? I said, how do you feel about us getting a set of 9mm and taking the kid out shooting? And he said, yeah, I'm game for that. And so we kind of talked about it a little bit, and I kind of looked at guns online. I talked to Nancy briefly about it, and Nancy said that her and Dan had plans. Funny, because Dan and I were talking about the same thing.
And before I ask that next question, to clarify, is your husband's name also Dan?
Yes, my Dan is Danny, her Dan is Daniel. So it's my Dan, her Dan.
All right. And so did you explain your plan to Nancy?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so what did she tell you?
She said that sounded fun. Just, a target practice, make sure you take a class. Nancy was always the mother. Make sure you take a class, make sure you know how to use it.
Okay. And you said that she was thinking of the same.
What she said was, that's funny. Dan and I were talking about the same plan.
And do you know what part, did she elaborate, like when you say the same plan, which part of your plan?
But getting a gun, buying a gift that we can use as a family, because we don't really need anything. So what can we do for Christmas? Like that kind of a plan, whether it be go on a trip, buy a boat, whatever.
Okay. And did you and Nancy talk specifics at all about like how you were going to do that, or purchasing them, or anything like that?
Well, my plan kind of got blown up because I saw the blue Tiffany gun, and my husband boycotted that right off the bat because it was $3,500. So our plan never went to fruition. But we talked about, she said that she did tell me that there was a gun show coming up, and I, of course, went, yeah, that sounds great. And then life happened, and gun show apparently came and went, and I missed it.
And did she tell you when that was?
She might have. I don't remember.
Do you remember if this is a plan? Was this a plan before Christmas to do before Christmas?
We talked about this, like I said, October or November. And in our conversation, I asked her, so what do you guys need a gun for? And she said, well, he's always in the woods by himself. And in all fairness, he's up in the middle of nowhere hunting mushrooms by himself. So it kind of made sense.
All right. And it sounds like then you never followed up with her.
I didn't, because it didn't happen for me, and I got off on a different tangent, and we ended up with metal detectors.
You and your husband?
That's what he got.
Okay. All right. And did you ever then, specifically talking about Dan Brophy, did you ever talk to Dan Brophy about firearms?
I did, after I talked to Nancy, I went back to work, and because I'd showed Dan the picture of the Tiffany gun, and
Dan Brophy?
yes, and he said the exact same statement my husband said. Why do you need a $3,500 gun when a $500 gun will fire a bullet the same way? And so I was not going to win my argument with Dan Brophy either. So yeah, but that was my conversation with him.
With Dan Brophy. Okay. Did you talk to him about anything you and Nancy had talked about?
I said, I heard you guys were you were looking at, this is what me and my Dan are planning for Christmas. We're talking about. I heard that you guys were looking at this too for target practice. And he said, yeah, target practice would be fun. Because we were talking with Kayla, who's my cousin's kid that I had guardianship of. And Kayla was the one that was mostly interested in it.
All right. And is that the extent of the conversation you had with Dan Brophy about that?
Yes.
And did you ever follow up with him about Christmas gifts or what had happened?
No.
And with Nancy, did you ever revisit the gun show or follow up about?
No.
Okay. And was the plan when you talked to her to go to the gun show together?
She had mentioned it, and yeah, kind of in hindsight, we talked about it, but then, I was raising a kid, somebody else's kid, life happened, and I got busy, work blew up, and it wasn't really a priority for me.
And it sounds like from something you just said that did you and your husband have firearms or had knowledge about firearms?
Oh, no, we have firearms.
Okay. And had you talked to Nancy about that before? Did she know you had firearms?
Yeah, when Nancy had her catering company back at the Beth Temple, Israel, way back, she had a chef named Ed who worked with me prior at the Hilton Hotel, and there was somebody had disassembled a wooden futon and threw it out in the side street, and I had been talking to Nancy about it. I wanted to get a gun cabinet for my husband's guns, because my husband has a lot of his father's antique double barrel shotguns. I'm talking, these guns are over 100 years old. And the chef Ed was the guy who was working with woodworking, and he was getting into blacksmithing. And so I said to Ed, hey, how do you feel about building a gun cabinet with this? And he went, yeah, I could do it. I said, really? He said, yeah. And he built me to this day. It's beautiful. A beautiful gun cabinet with that futon wood, and then he added hazelnut wood to it. And then he made the latches and everything, he blacksmithed all that and the lock.
And so did Nancy ever then sort of ask you questions about firearms other than this conversation you had about the Christmas gift?
No, we've never, no.
Had she come to you and talked to you about firearms, had questions, wanted to go shooting? Is that something you or your husband could have helped her with?
Oh, I totally would have gone shoot with her and Dan. We would have went target practicing with them, but no, it was never a conversation that we discussed, because as far as the gun didn't happen for us, so I moved on to the next thing in my life.
Put it out of your mind.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And during that conversation or in any conversations that followed with Nancy, did she ever talk to you specifically about school shootings or concerns about school shootings generally or school shootings at the Culinary Institute?
No, the only conversation I had with Nancy that the phrase school shooting came out was the morning she called me when Dan was shot.
Nothing before that. All right. And sort of along those same lines, and you may have already answered this. Did Nancy ever tell you, it sounds like not at Christmas time, but any time after that, that she had in fact purchased a firearm?
There was, I want to say February, we talked briefly, and she asked what we ended up doing. We had coffee. We were talking about, I think we were helping Brandon with his life insurance. She had said, So what did you and Dan end up doing? And I said, well, we got a big argument about the blue Tiffany gun, and that got kiboshed, and he got metal detectors, and so that's what we did. What'd you do? And she said that they had purchased the gun, and it's still in the box.
And she told you this back in February
It would have been
2018?
February, yeah.
Did you ask her any more questions about that?
No, no. She said it was in the box, and that was that.
All right. And Ms. Mellon, do you remember talking to Detective Posey on a couple of different occasions?
Yes.
During his investigation? Do you remember him asking you if you'd ever talked to Nancy or Dan about firearms?
You know, when he came to see me, honestly, the first time he came to see me, I was not so great because I was really in the mindset that my buddy was tragically bleeding to death, dying. So I literally, honestly couldn't remember. I remember maybe 3 things he said to me. So if he said it in the first meeting, I don't recall. And yeah, I don't.
Do you recall telling him in the second meeting that you don't remember anything about firearms or talking to Nancy about firearms?
I don't recall if I said anything to him regarding that. I honestly don't. I may have. I don't. If he asked me, I may have. I don't know.
But you're testifying today about what you remember at this point.
Yeah.
All right. And you mentioned, and I want to talk then about finding out about Dan's death in June of 2018. Do you recall where you were and what you sort of first heard or knew?
Yes, I can remember it like it was yesterday.
So where were you and what was the first information?
I was on the Oregon coast. I took Kayla out crabbing because she wanted to learn how to go Dungeness crabbing. And so my husband and I took her camping out at the Barview Jetty in Rockaway. And then I took her down to Garibaldi and went out on the Tall Street Pier, dropped some traps. And I was going to head into Tillamook because we went camping as, I have 11 godchildren, so we all went camping as a group, as a family. And it was somebody else's birthday, so I was going into Tillamook to buy a cake. And I left Kayla on the dock with the pots, and I said, I'll be back. Got in the car, got up onto 101, started heading south, and the phone rang.
And who called you?
It was Nancy. And I answered. I've always, I mean, it's not a call I would ignore. So it was Nancy. It was a Saturday morning. So what's going on?
And what did she tell you?
First she says, I said, oh, hey, Nancy, what's up? And she said, good morning, Tonya. And she sounded very just not Nancy. And she said, there was another school shooting. And I went, Christ, where now? I was thinking high school, whatever. And then she said at OCI, and I still didn't register. I went, well, my God. I said, was anybody hurt? And she said, well, yeah. And I said, wait, where was it? And she said, at the Oregon Culinary Institute. I went, is Dan okay? And she said, her response was, no, Dan's not okay. And I said, well, is he in the hospital? What's going on? And she said, no, Dan's dead. And at that point, I was getting pulled over because I was apparently driving 65 in a 25 because I wasn't paying attention. So.
And you said, what day was this? Was this Saturday?
This was Saturday morning. I worked with Dan Friday night. We worked together an 8-hour shift. Saturday I was going crabbing, and I was leaving the following weekend for my grandson's graduation. So that was the conversation. Dan and I worked Friday night, and we talked about, graduation gifts. I asked him about, Nathaniel. We talked about that for a while, and then I went home and got up, went crabbing the next morning. So.
And so you were at the coast. What did you, after you got that phone call, what did you do?
I obviously slowed down, turned around, went back, pulled up the pots, grabbed Kayla, went back to camp, told my husband, and broke down camp and headed back to Portland.
All right. And okay. And do you remember what time that call was? Was it morning, afternoon?
It was mid-morning. Because we dropped the pots in about 9:30. And I was on the dock with Kayla for a bit till I got her settled. and then I went to go get the cake. So I didn't have a clock with me because I was out crabbing, but it was, I mean, I threw the pots in at 9:30-ish, so somewhere between that and noon.
All right. And it sounds like you didn't come back. Did you come back that day then home, or did you?
No, we broke down camp because it was, till we got camp broke down and everything, we were set and we left at first light in the morning.
Okay.
on
and
Sunday.
So Sunday morning, you came back to Portland.
Correct.
Okay. And did you, do you remember, did you talk to Nancy again that day after?
We literally went to the house, dropped the trailer, locked it up, because you got to put it up on trucks and stuff, and we went right to Nancy's house.
Okay, so you got just one phone call from her on Saturday sometime?
Correct.
Okay, didn't talk to her again until you went to her house?
Correct.
All right. And you and your husband went over to Nancy's house on Sunday?
Correct.
Okay. And when you went to her house, were other people there?
Yes.
Friends or family?
There was one lady I don't know. She's somebody from her writers group, and then Jack and Karen were sitting on the bench chair kind of thing, and it was me, my husband, and Kayla.
When you went to Nancy's house that morning, I assume you talked to her.
Oh yeah.
Did you have a conversation with Nancy about what had happened?
Yeah. I said, what the hell? I mean, walk me through this.
And what did she tell you?
She said, from what she understood, he left in the morning, somewhere about 7:05. He got to the school, and she wasn't sure if when he got to the school, if he left the door unlocked or what happened. But obviously, his students came in and found him when classes started, and yeah.
And did she tell you at all what she was doing that morning?
Oh, I asked her. My exact words were, "Where the hell were you when this was happening?" Like, I literally said it like that in front of everybody, because I was just, my God, I still can't believe it. And she said, "I was at home in bed writing."
And did you talk any further at that point about what had happened?
We talked. We were there for a few hours, and we talked about it. And I mean, we didn't talk like details about it or anything, but we just, like, why, who would do this?
Talked
Like,
in a group with other
Yeah, like,
people?
why? He was the nicest guy on the planet. Why?
Well, and it sounds like you were there for a while. While you were there that particular day on June 3rd, did Nancy give you any items to take back with you?
She gave me his chef coats, which was the main reason that she called me the day prior, was, "I know you have Dan on the schedule," because I had him scheduled at Avamere. He was scheduled to work on Sunday, and I remember the conversation, because after she said that, I said, "Don't worry, that's the least of my problems. I'll figure that out." And so, and then Sunday when we went, we were there for a few hours at least, and she said, "Here, I want to make sure you take back the Avamere jackets so you have them for the rest of the crew."
And so those were Dan's chef coats?
Yeah, they were all hanging right there on a treadmill.
And she just gave them all to you?
Just that, because he had different coats for different jobs.
Just the
And-
Avamere coats?
Yeah.
All right. After that initial visit on June 3rd, did you go back to Nancy's house, have more contact with her?
Oh yeah.
And did you go to help her? What did that look like?
I helped her for the next 4 months. Not just me, the kitchen crew from Beaverton, my husband, a lot of us were there helping her.
And what were you helping her do?
Well, at first it was tearing the house apart, and cleaning. She called me and asked me to help specifically with the basement. So I went back and helped with the basement. I went over originally more just for support, to talk to her. And then she said, I have a specific job I need help with. Can you help me with this? And I said, yes. And it was the basement. And that was where the majority of his chef stuff was, like his pots, his pans, his processors, his canning stuff.
And was she asking you to clean it up, to get rid of it, to pack it?
Go through it. We went through everything, and everything we went through, there was a you know, obviously a junk pile. There was a, you know, she's keeping pile. There was a specific Nathaniel pile. You know, that goes to Nathaniel, that goes to Jack. Like there were piles.
And was this pretty soon after that first day you saw her?
It would have been almost 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. Because I believe her brother died and she was dealing with that.
Okay, so she was gone for a period.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was after that that you were helping her.
Yeah.
Okay, and during that time period over the summer that you were helping her, did Nancy ever talk to you about firearms at that point or owning a gun?
No, no,
Did she mention having anything in the house or anything like that?
no. It was more of trying to find the will.
The will?
Yeah.
Was that found? Were you part of that at all?
I was not part of finding the will, but it was found.
And throughout the summer, as you were helping her in those next several weeks, did Nancy ever talk to you further or tell you anything more about the investigation? Or
I asked her constantly, have you heard from the police? I asked her constantly, and it was no. I haven't heard anything.
That sounds like you brought that up repeatedly.
Repeatedly.
And was that always her response?
Yes, because they never, to my knowledge, when I asked her, she's never once said, oh, they called me today and discussed the case with me. Yeah, no.
And in those conversations, did she communicate to you, was she trying to get information and they weren't responding to her, or?
I had asked her numerous times, have you heard from the police? And she said, no, I haven't heard anything. And I said, have you called them? And she said, well, I have called a few times, but beyond that, she didn't elaborate. I didn't ask.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Medlin.
Morning.
Let me unwire myself here. I want to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 256 and ask if you can identify this.
Yeah, this is Dan's time clock punches.
So at
Hours.
Avamere, you actually had a clock that you punched in?
Yes, yeah.
And do you have personal knowledge regarding where that clock is and
Yes.
what the procedures were?
Yes.
And can you just describe generally what would happen if an employee came in?
Well, he always parked in the back lot. You come in the back door. It's a fingerprint chronos thing. You hit your fingerprint. If your fingerprint didn't work, you had an employee login number that you punched in, and then you hit start shift.
That's pretty fancy.
Day and age, well, you need a 5-year-old to run your cell phone.
I just want to ask you about December 24th. And can you determine from this record whether Dan Brophy was working on that day?
Yeah, he punched in at 1:49,
What time did he punch out?
7:48, 6-hour shift.
Are you familiar with the Brophys' home?
Yes,
And obviously you're familiar with the location of Avamere, is that right?
correct.
What's the name of that exhibit? The number?
I think it's 228.
I want to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 228. It's going to pop up on your
Oh,
screen. I
okay,
imagine.
sorry, new here.
Let me ask you, you've got a little pointer there, a little green pointer.
Yes,
You're going to turn around, you're going to look at a really big version of what you're looking at on the tiny screen.
okay.
I wonder if you can show the jury where Avamere is.
You want me to point that one up there?
Yeah, how about?
Okay.
Oh, it gets longer. You can make that.
I just
okay.
figured that out.
Cool.
Like I said, I'm new here.
You're on top.
Their house is here.
Okay, and where's Avamere?
Here.
And is that about a 2-mile distance?
I'm a left or right girl. I don't know. Yeah, sure. It's about a 5 or 6 minute trip.
Okay, so it's a quick trip.
Yeah.
So if you left Avamere at, what'd you say, 7:48? Would you expect that Dan would be home before 8 o'clock?
Well, it would depend, honestly, it's 2:17, which is a nightmare. I mean, if there's an accident, you could be there 40 minutes.
Sure.
So, yeah.
What about on
but
Christmas
on a given
Eve?
day, if he left work at 10 till, I would think he'd be home by 5 after. 15 minutes is, yeah.
Well, it's a 5-minute drive. What's he doing for the other 10 minutes?
Well, until he goes outside, starts his truck, gets his stuff organized.
Okay.
You know, he always took stuff out for his chickens,
Sure.
and put it in the truck. You know,
Okay.
the scraps, you know.
Okay.
I mean, to be fair.
Loading up?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair
You
enough.
know, and he had an older truck, so he never jumped in it, started it, and took off. He would give it a second. and
Were you
then-
working on, you can sit down again, I'm
Sorry.
sorry. Were you working on Christmas Eve?
I don't know.
You
I
know-
don't remember.
Okay.
That was, yeah, I work so much, I don't know.
You were working on June 1st though, is that right?
Yes, Friday, yes.
And do you remember anything about a waffle iron on June 1st?
On June 1st, not on June 1st. I had a conversation with Dan about a waffle iron prior. Nancy after.
Okay. Did Dan Brophy own a waffle iron
Yes.
that was kind of a big
Yes, he had a
commercial?
Big Daddy one.
And this is something that weighed like 40 or 50 pounds?
Oh, yeah.
And was it an appliance that Dan Brophy loved?
Yeah, it was a commercial waffle iron.
Okay. And do you know whether he would take that waffle iron with him from time to time to the school?
Yes, he took a lot of his equipment to the school. He brought a lot of his equipment to work.
You testified that from time to time you would call Nancy Brophy and complain, or not complain, just kind of kvetch about your own marriage, is that right?
No, I'd call and complain. You can say it. That's good.
Yeah,
I love my husband, but you know, he's apple my eye, pain in my ass. It all goes with the thing.
okay. Did Nancy Brophy ever complain to you about Dan Brophy?
My conversations with Nancy would go, oh my God, my husband, I would say, and forgive me, but I would say I'm going to kill them because he was driving me crazy. And Nancy would say, what's going on? And I'd tell her what's going on. And she would be, Tonya, you want a long marriage, correct? Yeah. Okay. 50 years down the road, is this the argument you want to keep having? Pick your battles. This is, you know what? This is one you can let him win. Okay. As much as I didn't want to, you know, and in the end, 90% of the time she was right. I hate to admit it, but she was right.
Did Nancy complain to you about her marriage with Dan?
She would laugh and say, you know, Tonya, at the end of the day, what's important is, you know, my Dan still makes me laugh.
And in the time that you've known Nancy Brophy, has she always expressed an appreciation for the fact that Dan Brophy could make her laugh?
Always.
Did that ever change?
No.
Just before Dan Brophy died, did you have a conversation with Dan or Nancy regarding plans they were making for a birthday celebration?
I didn't discuss plans with them. I discussed with Dan that he wanted the week of June 27th off for his birthday.
And do you know whether they had a trip planned for that week?
You know, honestly, I don't remember. I was more concerned with making sure I had him off the schedule.
You described going over to the Brophys' house after Dan died to help clean up the basement.
Yes.
And was that because you had provided some organizational help to Nancy Brophy earlier when you had worked for her?
I worked for Nancy's catering company many times. Even when I wasn't working for her, she would call and say, hey, can you come do the third floor? Because the third floor is where they kept all their all the stuff that they took to caterings, all their equipment. And, you know, you come back from an event, you dump it. So I'd go up and reorganize.
So she knew that you had some organizational skills.
Oh, yeah.
Describe for the jury what you saw when you got to this basement.
It was dirty. It was a mess. There was, they had, I guess, some kind of issue with, I don't know if it was a raccoon, a rat, something. They had there was animal droppings. There was,
it was just a lot of stuff piled up, and yeah, a lot. There was a lot there.
And when you say there was a lot, do you know whose a lot it was?
Well, there was everything from pans to pots to canningware to, jars to, catering. There was just anything you could think of in the food world was down there.
Do you know whether that basement area was Dan's area, Nancy's area, or something they both used?
I would assume the laundry would be both of them because they have clean clothes. But I think it was mostly storage and, where they stored canning stuff, where they stored equipment. I'm sure in the past for the catering company that where the equipment for culinary was, I'm sure that was, chef de jour stuff too. I mean, they're both in the business.
So you testified that you went there to try to help clean up and to organize.
Oh, I did. We did. We got it cleaned up.
And you were going through items. Some items were being thrown away. Some items were being given away. Some items were being sold.
There was certain things that were not sold. I don't know anything was sold.
Okay.
There was, hang on, let me back that up. That's not 100% true. There were some things that were sold to Avamere, me as a company, that my company purchased.
Okay.
And they were like the rubber scrapers and spoons and things that my crew uses every day that they, leave on the burning pan and screw up that I can't have. So it's things that I have to replace consistently. So, yeah, there was those things. And I'm going to say it was maybe $100 worth of stuff that Avamere bought, but it was like spoons, stuff
Okay.
like that.
Is
But-
it fair to say that Dan had multiples of multiples of
Multiples. Yeah, Dan had 12 of everything. If you needed it, ask him.
So you're actually able to restock some of what you needed for Avamere from
Yes.
Dan's stock of
Yes.
things downstairs?
Yeah.
Would it be, and I don't want to say this in a judgmental way, but would you agree that Dan Brophy was a collector of stuff?
He did not like to throw things away in case he needed it.
Okay.
That's the way I'd like to say it. He
All right.
wasn't so much a collector as he was, you know what, there's going to come a time when I need that and I'm going to know right where it's at.
When you were at the Brophy home, did you recognize that there were some spaces that Dan used primarily and some spaces within the home that Nancy maybe had to herself?
Yeah, that's fair.
Some rooms that were very clean and some rooms that maybe were,
No,
No.
I wouldn't say clean or unclean. Nancy's house was it was never dirty. It was just, he made homemade ketchup. He made homemade sauces. I mean, the kitchen was his domain. The dining room, the bright pink dining room was Nancy's. The sitting room up front actually belonged to the dogs, I think.
okay. You said that you brought a crew over.
Yes.
Tell me what the crew did. How many people were there and what did you do?
I helped Nancy all summer, and it was, a carload here, a carload there, stuff like that. Again, there was specific things that were going to storage. There were specific things for Jack. There were specific things for Nathaniel, and like she was adamant about that. There was certain things that she was keeping. There was a picture frame. I want to say it's toothpaste, but I don't know what it is. I could be wrong. But that she was keeping that. It was something that Dan loved. And there was things that she just were too big. She couldn't use. I believe I was given his desk. I think it was his desk. That's in my office at home now. And they had a little armoire thing which is now in my husband's office, and he uses it. Things like that. There was a giant stainless steel rondo that she gave me. Some knives that she gave me. There were some other pans that she gave me. There was a copper pan that, in conversation with Jack, found Nathaniel wanted, so I made sure the family got that one back. Yeah.
How many people did you bring over your crew?
So Anthony, Brandon, Jimmy, Wesley. 5 or 6.
Okay, so it was you and maybe a crew of 5 or 6.
Yeah, it was my guys at work, my sous chef, his friend was a truck driver for one of the hauling companies, and he was able to get a free truck and free labor to help her move.
Okay. And while you were there doing things, maybe sometimes when you were there with the crew and other times when you weren't,
The
did
crew
you-
was there once. They came one day, did what they had to do and got rid of it. for her.
Okay, but there were many other people who came to that house to help clean out. Isn't
Yeah,
that true?
Susan was there.
Were you there on a cleaning day when some of the writer friends were there?
The only writer friend that I recall and remember is the woman the first day that I went after we drove back from the coast on Sunday. And that woman was there and she was a bigger lady and she kept trying to shove food in Nancy's face to make her eat. And Nancy was not interested in eating.
Let's talk about that. We've heard testimony that maybe Nancy Brophy didn't seem sad after Dan died. Was that your impression?
I have had conversation with Nancy. I've seen Nancy fall apart. I also know that in my history of my friendship with Nancy and the fact that I know Nancy from a business end, Nancy is business. Nancy is very straightforward, to the point, don't beat around the bush. And I think that when well, it's not really I think, I know because I've worked with her, when it happens to her and stress hits her, she goes right into like boom, like built like, marching steps. In order for me to keep moving, I got to put the next foot in front of the other one. Like that's how she ran her business. That's how, when things attacked her, because I worked with her at the River Place Alexis Hotel. When she first came and she was my roommate, I got her a job there. And, she worked out in the patio that summer. And it's a high pressure job. And, there were days she was frazzled. And she would kick right into that mode. It's like a business mode.
So her coping mechanism was to take care of business and stay busy.
She was always busy.
And I think you said that summer, right after Dan died, her brother had died?
Yes, I believe it was almost like to the day a week later.
Okay. And how did she respond to that?
Same way.
Yeah.
It was, I don't want to say matter of fact, but this is what's happening. This is what I got to deal with.
One step forward.
Yeah, it was just, this is what I got to deal with. So I don't really have a choice. I just have to get this done.
Do you know whether Nancy Brophy was on the mortgage to the Brophys' home?
I know she was on the note, or she was on the mortgage, or she was on the mortgage and not in the note. It was one or the other, and I can't remember which way it went.
And do you know whether that created some pressure for her to sell that home that
Yes,
quickly?
it was an immense pressure.
And how did she talk to you about that pressure?
Yes, and as a woman who's married to a man who's 20 years older than me, who at one point on our mortgage was not allowed to be on it because it's a VA loan, I get that, because you can lose everything. Like, I get that. But it didn't, I didn't pay attention to anything going on. I was there supporting my friend and helping her.
Sure.
That's what my heart was telling me to do.
But it was your understanding that she was getting that house sold quickly because she was nervous about not being on the note.
Well, that and the fact that, we had a conversation about she can't do anything. There's, she's kind of stuck.
Tell me more. I don't understand what you're saying.
She wanted to sell the house so that, because she couldn't even, I don't believe that our conversation was she had to sell the house because once she turns him the death certificate into Social Security to claim the benefit, it would go out to the banks.
Okay. And did you understand that was why she was in a hurry?
It made sense to me at the time.
Okay.
Yes.
There was also testimony about the fact that the chickens were given away soon after Dan died.
Nancy doesn't like birds. Yes, they were gone like immediately.
Okay. Did you ever see Nancy take care of the chickens?
No.
That was primarily Dan's responsibility.
And he loved his birds, yes. His girls, his ladies.
Okay. Is that what he calls them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were days he had to go home and have a conversation with them because they weren't laying.
To be the fly on that wall. I wonder if you could describe for the jury just generally what that back lot looked like.
Oh, Lord, it was a mess. I used to, this is my biggest joke with Dan. And I used to say to Nancy, how do you do this?
because my husband would be out here cleaning this. And it was one of those conversations where Nancy responded with, this makes him happy. This makes my husband happy. Do I want to go out and do yard work? No. Do I want to deal with the birds? No. This is his thing. You know, as long as he's happy, this is not a battle I'm going to pick. That was that conversation. That
And
was
was
what it
that true throughout the time that you knew Nancy and Dan, that she would not quibble or quarrel over the things that made Dan happy?
Specifically the yard. Yeah. That, and I've never, Dan loved what he did. I mean, and from where I stood, I never saw Dan hinder her nor her hinder him. It wasn't a one-way street. Like, I've never seen it.
Did you get the impression that they had an unusually healthy partnership from your perspective?
I wouldn't say it was unusually healthy. I think they were just happy. You know, I thought they were happy together. I thought they were happy people. I mean, I never saw them. We went to concerts. I never saw them fight.
Well, you actually got to talk to Dan as you got to know him.
Yeah, yeah.
And it sounds like if you brought up personal things, he wouldn't raise a personal issue himself, but if you brought one up, he would then have a conversation with you.
Yeah, we had a great conversation the night before he died.
And that was about his son.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
It was based around my grandson Kyle, who was graduating high school, and he was heading off to Texas A&M. And I wanted to get, I don't have kids, so these are my step grandchildren. And I said to Dan, what did you get Nathaniel for graduation? Because I don't know what an appropriate gift is. And he asked me, what do you want to do? I said, I just want to hand him $1,000, but I want to show up the other two grandmothers. And he said, well, let's break it down, because that's how Dan was. Let's break it down. And so we talked about it, and I said, well, what did you do for Nathaniel? And he said, I was not exactly, and he was, and I could tell that the conversation tugged at him, because when he doesn't want to show his feelings, he kind of diverts his eyes and he gets busy with his knife. And he said, I wasn't there. I was estranged from my son at that time in his life. And he said that he regretted it to this day, because he wasn't there during his graduation like he should have been. That's what he said to me.
Did he talk to you at all that night about the fact that Nancy had helped him repair that relationship?
He didn't say that. He just said that he had been working very hard to restore. We talked a lot about, and I'm going to probably say her name wrong, and I apologize, Adeline, the little granddaughter. He loved her. We talked about pancakes. We talked about how he made her pancakes, and that was his highlight. He looked forward to that. And, you know, when she was in the kitchen with him, she was the boss, not him. So, yeah, we talked about that all on Friday night.
Let me just quickly look at my notes, and then maybe I can liberate you. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, redirect.
In just 1 second, I do have
Sure.
a couple questions. Just one question for you, Ms. Medlin. In talking about the deed or the bank note, it sounds like you couldn't remember which.
It was, I'm trying to remember, because I was in the same situation at one point, and I'm trying to remember what it was. My husband was on the VA loan, so he was on the loan and I was on the deed. And Oregon law at the time, because I'm now on both, but the Oregon law at the time was, if, say, my husband died, the bank would then come in and do a background, you know, like a, whatever you
Sure.
call it,
Yep.
credit check on me to see whether or not I could carry the mortgage.
And so in that conversation, did Nancy tell you that she just recently been put on the deed?
No, she just said that she was on one, but she was on the deed, but not the mortgage.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
All right, may this witness be excused.
Yes.
For defense?
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Thank you, Ms. Medlin. Ms. Herman?
Thank you. And the state will call Andrian Alderson such.
Andrew Alderson. All right, and just as a reminder to everyone, the plan is to go up until 12:30 roughly, but then we'll give you a longer lunch. You can come up here to this witness box area just to the side, and we'll have you step up into the box and just stand by the chair for a moment while my clerk gives you an oath.
I'll have you step a little closer to the microphone, and then please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, then you may be seated, and you can remove your mask. And then, because we're being recorded, I'll please ask you to state and spell your first and last name.
Right now?
Yes.
Andrea Alderson Such. It's Andria Alderson-Such.
Okay, and there is a pitcher of water there if you want it. It's up to you,
Okay.
but whenever the state is ready.
Thank you and good morning. Can you tell the jury how are you currently employed?
I work for Safe Corporation.
And in what capacity?
I actually just took a new job this week. So I was a senior technical claims adjuster, and now I'm working for our training team, and I'm a trainer job coach.
All right. And so we'll talk about your previous position.
Yes.
And is that the same position you had in the summer of 2018?
Yes.
And so how long had you had that position?
I had started that position February of 2013.
And go ahead.
I was gonna say, I've worked for Safe for 16 years.
That was going to be my question. And so can you explain what a senior claims adjuster is, kind of what you do, and as part of that, perhaps what SAFE is and what SAFE does?
So SAFE is a workers' compensation carrier for the state of Oregon. And so we provide workers' compensation insurance for policyholders and businesses in Oregon. I was in our critical claims team as a senior technical adjuster. So critical claims, we would handle the very, very serious traumas, serious injuries, certain complex medical conditions, and then we also process fatal claims.
And so these are claims that an employee has
Mhm.
because of injury and or death on the job or related
Correct.
to the workplace.
Mhm. And then as an adjuster, you get a claim, and then you decide if you're going to accept that claim or deny that claim based off of the laws, the rules, the regulations, and the facts of the claim.
And the state of Oregon governs a lot of that.
Yes, the Workers' Compensation Division and the Workers' Compensation Board.
All right. And so if we're specifically talking about a death claim, what does that sort of look like? What is SAFE's role? What are you looking for? And how does that sort of start out?
So typically those claims are received by our policyholders, and it's similar to any other claim. It comes in, it's in a deferred status. We gather information to make a decision on the claim to either accept it or deny it. And we're looking at different factors. The cause of death, were they within the course and scope of their job? Are they an Oregon subject employee? I mean, there's just so many different factors that we're looking at to make a decision on a claim. All claims, including fatal claims.
And so when you talk about making a decision, what is that decision?
You're either going to accept a claim or deny a claim.
And if the claim's denied, I assume that means then there's no payment made to anybody?
On a fatal claim, typically not. On a regular claim, you may pay interim time loss benefits, which is a mandatory interim benefit that's required. And then if a claim is denied, of course, there's appeals process and litigation and whatnot.
So let's talking specifically about death claims.
Mhm.
For your particular role at that time, how do you get notified? And then is it just you doing the work? Are there more people involved?
The adjuster is the one that's typically gathering information, but we are always using other resources at SAFE. So SAFE has their own investigators, we have our own attorneys. So we're constantly staffing claims with coworkers, supervisors, management, especially a fatal type claim. You're going to staff that claim typically before you even make a decision on it, or, do you need maybe to utilize your resources for like what information should I gather? This type of claim is not the typical cause of death for fatal claims. So
The claim in this
particular
case.
claim. So there was a lot of people involved.
Okay. So would it be fair to say then, and we'll talk about this particular claim in a second, that a claim where there is a homicide involved is perhaps different than a claim where someone dies, like clearly in the middle of performing a duty or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So moving, and I'll ask some more questions as we move to this particular claim. Back in, well, prior to the business closing, but specifically back in June of 2018, did SAFE have a contract or work with Oregon Culinary Institute?
We and I believe there's a parent company, and we insured them, so they were one of our policyholders.
And that's like Pioneer College or Pioneer Pacific. Does that sound right?
Correct.
Okay. And so how does that work then? Did they notify you? How did the claim related to Daniel Brophy come in?
So they submitted the claim. There's a form that an employer submits. It's called an 801 form. And so they submitted the claim, submitted the form, the claim was set up. And I believe that, and it might not have been me at the time, it might have been a coworker. Typically with fatal claims, the employer calls us right away. And so because they've never gone through this before, so they don't even know the processing or what they're supposed to do or whatnot. So I believe the employer called in earlier that day, submitted the claim, and then it was set up, and that was on June 4th, I believe.
And so that would have been Monday. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Following the death on
Correct.
Saturday.
Mhm.
All right. And so did that come to you, or how did you get assigned?
So it was assigned because that was my geographical area at the time, kind of Portland metro area. And so we were aligned geographically, and so the claim came to me.
And so what do? You get that form 801. What is your next steps?
You do some data entry basically based off of what's on the form. And then I called the policyholder, because that's typically what we're going to do, is talk to our policyholder first, especially with a fatal claim, and just kind of gather basic information. What happened? What do they know about what happened? Are there any beneficiaries? Just kind of gathering some really basic information.
And who is the policyholder? Do you remember particularly in this case?
I think her name was Sherry or Cherie. Typically on bigger accounts, there's a person designated at a business to be like the work comp contact, and she was our work comp contact.
Okay, so she was an employee for perhaps the parent company?
Yes.
Okay. And so you first got information from her about kind of, I assume it's beyond whatever is on that form 801.
Right. Kind of confirming what happened, what was their understanding of what happened that day. Obviously police were involved, and there's, a lot of folks that were going to be involved in this. So what did they know at that point? Basic information. Beneficiary would be a spouse or children, because that's who we would be paying benefits to if we accept a claim. sometimes, and I can't remember if I even asked, I probably did, do they know if there is a funeral date set? Because we're trying to figure out also when is an appropriate time to contact the family. So just getting some basic information.
And is the beneficiary information not information you have? Like if you had, because you're contracting with the employer, so you wouldn't have that information, is that
No,
right?
so we would typically ask them, do you know, is your employee married? Do they have children? So we're getting some of that basic information. If there are no beneficiaries, who's the maybe the next of kin, the emergency contact? So who are we going to reach out to?
All right. And so you did all of that in this
Mhm.
case? Okay. And were you provided with some beneficiary information?
Yes.
All right. And specifically, who did you then decide to contact?
So Mr. Brophy was married, and so we got, obviously I got the wife's information, and I did reach out to her. I believe my first call to her was on June 8th.
And was that Nancy Brophy that you called?
Hmm.
Okay. And was that a phone conversation?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember what you talked about and what she told you?
This is obviously going back almost 4 years, but I do remember, and then I've of course reviewed my claim notes, but always offering condolences, when you're talking to a widow or a family member that just, that lost one of their family members. So offered condolences, just tried to get some basic information of, her understanding of what happened, and has she received any additional information from the police? Prior to that, I believe I had talked to the employer about the funeral home. And what we will do is we will reach out to funeral homes and we will tell them that we've received a claim. Would they be willing to not bill the family, send the bill to SAFE? We will hold that bill, and if the claim is accepted, then we can reimburse them. We can't make any guarantee of payment or anything like that. So I had gotten the information from the policyholder on the funeral home or the crematorium, and I had left them a message the day before. So I told Ms. Brophy that I had talked to them, but I haven't heard back yet. And then we talked about benefits, what the benefits are, and there is a form that we need a beneficiary to complete. I'd be sending out that form. It needs to be notarized, and we would need a copy of their marriage license.
Okay. And I have a couple questions for you about that in a second. First, going back, did you talk to her about the details of what had happened that morning?
So yes, what I was told is, and I had been provided some of this information from the employer. So this was a Saturday morning. He was there to teach a class early and was alone at the time. That was their understanding, at least. And he had often brought me his own supplies and spices and different things in. And it was their understanding that he was kind of loading things into the building. Maybe a door was left open. And I don't remember who found him. That was probably provided to me, but I don't remember. So I just kind of confirmed that information with her. And she had told me, according to my claim notes, that he had left that morning. I believe it was 7:10. I think he was found around 8:30. And that a friend had called and said, what's going on down at the Culinary Institute? And she had flipped on the news and I believe called his mother, and then she went down there. And then she was, had been notified that he had been murdered, shot. And in that conversation also, she had said that, she was obviously concerned about finances and that she was concerned about life insurance monies, that they had told her that they didn't know the timeline on that, that she could possibly be involved in the situation, and was still needing to get the death certificate. And I asked if the police had given her any additional information. because of course we're trying to find out this information as well. And she kind of reiterated the same thing that the employer told me, that he got there early, he was alone, there was no cameras, and that the police were going to kind of surveil or check the footage around the surrounding areas.
And did you, and I guess I should ask, I assume you're asking, or are you asking these specific details because you need to know it for your information?
Correct.
For your
Mhm.
documentation?
Yes, that maybe she would have information that our policy holder wouldn't have, or, that you can find in a news article or whatnot.
Okay. And did she tell you anything about like who was there that day?
I believe she told me that he was alone. Nobody was there at the time.
All right. And then you mentioned that you gave her benefit amounts.
Mhm.
How, and do you know how are those determined, or what amounts?
The state of Oregon determines the benefit amounts. So they are set amounts that usually change each July 1st. And so the state sets the beneficiary amounts for spouses, children. There's also a burial allowance. So those are set benefits that everybody gets the same benefits. They're set by the state of Oregon.
Okay, so it doesn't matter, the manner in which you die. Anytime in that calendar year from July to July, the benefits are going to be exactly
Right.
the
It doesn't
same.
matter your wages at the time of your death. They're set benefits.
Okay. Okay, so it doesn't matter at all how much you're making, no scale in that regard.
Correct. With fatal benefits.
Okay. And then is it, and tell me if this is not part of your job, because I can ask another witness, but is it then calculated, like what is the total amount provided? What does that look like? Like what are you telling her about?
So I don't think I told her about set or calculated amounts, because obviously if we accept a claim, we're going to set reserves on the claim, and that's going to be based off of the beneficiary information that's entered into the system. And then our computer system, thank goodness, calculates that for us. So it has life expectancy tables in there, inflation guard and whatnot, and the system comes up with that amount. So I didn't say a total amount, but I just told her what the monthly benefit is. And there's also a burial allowance, which is an additional benefit, and I discussed that as well.
Okay. And so there's just so I'm clear, there's a burial allowance, which is a set amount, and then there's a state determined monthly amount.
Right. The state determines the burial allowance as well. So it's a set amount. At that time, it was 19,000 some odd dollars, changes every July 1st. So if we do have a bill from a funeral home in our possession at the time that we're going to accept a claim, we would pay the funeral home, and then the balance of the burial allowance gets paid to the estate. So it has to be in the name of the estate. If we don't have a funeral bill in our possession, the entire amount gets paid to the estate.
All right. And so then the monthly allowance, or the monthly amount, is an amount that SAFE would pay to the beneficiary
Once a month.
And then it sounds like the state sets that, but then your company or the computer is calculating for how long that payment goes?
They're calculating what they think the ultimate cost of that claim is going to be.
Okay, so for as long as the beneficiary is going to live or something like that.
Correct. So
Okay.
the system has, like I said, life expectancy tables in there. So, which thank goodness, all I have to do is enter the information. The system does this for us, but it's based off of actuarial information, and so it will determine, okay, we've got a female at this age. We think they're going to live this long. They're going to get benefits for this long. The state does increase the amount, so we're going to put this inflation guard in there, and it comes up with the amount for us.
And is the set state amount, is that publicly available information?
Yeah.
And it just changes, it sounds like sometimes it goes up every year?
Yeah, every July 1st.
Okay. Sort of like cost of living increase?
Correct.
All right. And do you recall what that amount was at the time?
It went for a spousal benefit was just under $2,800 a month, $2,790 something. I know that you have that information.
All right. And so you had that first phone call with her. Did you have some subsequent contacts with Ms. Brophy as well?
I only had one additional call, and I believe it was June 18th. that's documented as well. And basically, she said that she had got the form and she was going to get it completed and notarized and send a copy of the marriage license in. And so that would be coming to me. It was a shorter conversation.
And so it sounds like you mentioned this a couple of times, that when you have these phone calls, you make notes in your system.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you had these contacts with Ms. Brophy, made some notes. Was that the extent of your role in this, or how did that work that other people then got involved?
Well, I had requested an investigation when the claim came in. So there were some investigators that were involved with trying to even talk to the police detective, trying to gather information. And then I had been staffing with some safe attorneys, my supervisor. Um, we, there was really no information, at least that we could gather, about kind of who they thought would have, who did this. And I had a conversation with my manager at the time, that we were going to just voluntarily pay interim benefits to her. So we decided that we are going to keep the claim in a deferred status, see what develops with the investigation and whatnot, the police investigation, but we were going to pay interim benefits. So we decided that on July 30th, and spousal or fatal benefits are paid the last working day of the month, typically. So I entered her in the system as a beneficiary. I entered a payment from, it was basically 2 months because it was, the date of death was June 2nd. So we paid those 2 months of benefits that went out on the 31st. And I had called Ms. Brophy to let her know we were going to do that. And I got her voicemail, left her a message. And then she had left me a message the same day, I believe, saying, I just want to know I got your message. Thank you for letting me know, and thank you for doing that.
Okay. And so you were part of the decision making and let me back that up. You referenced this earlier, but is part of the reason investigators got involved and there were some more people involved because of the homicide that had occurred?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So and we investigate every fatal claim, but definitely I would say there's more people involved because of the manner of death.
Okay. And so you were part of the decision then to go ahead and start making those monthly payments.
Yep, I received that approval. So
Okay. And so it sounds like that first payment then would have been double, so 2 months worth of.
almost 2 months minus a day.
Okay,
Correct.
so about $5,500 or just under.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
And then our system was automatically set up to do the next check, which would be the last working day of the month in August, which I think was the 31st. So that went out, that check went out. And then the morning of, I believe it was September 6th, my supervisor said he had heard on the news that Ms. Brophy had been arrested for the murder. So we put a stop payment on that check, but it had been cashed the day before. So.
Okay, and that was just for the one.
That was just for the month of August, 1 month.
Okay, so $27.92.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's really 3 months total payment.
Correct.
That had been sent and received.
Correct.
All right, and so you did not actually write the report or compile the information?
No, our fraud investigator did that.
Okay, and that's Ms. Aiken?
Yes.
Okay, and so your job, but you're really the one kind of controlling the figuring out the amounts that are going to be paid, getting that through the process.
Yeah, doing the data entry and the actual like processing.
All right, and then Ms. Aiken is the one that then compiled that into an actual document. Thank you. That's all the questions we have.
You're welcome.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
I think you said that Sherry Baker had contacted you originally,
Mm-hmm.
and Sherry Baker was an employee of Pacific Education,
She submitted the claim.
and that was the big company that ran OCI?
Right.
Okay. And when Ms. Baker called you, she called you on June 4th,
I think she had talked to possibly somebody else, to just say that we've had this loss, and maybe get some direction on filing the claim. So the claim was set up and assigned to me, and then I think I actually called her.
Okay, so there might have been a call that came before you guys talked to
Possibly,
each
I
other.
think so, yeah.
But when you talked with Sherry Baker, you kind of explained to her just the general outline of what would happen next.
Right, that we would be trying to gather information to make a decision on the claim, and kind of how fatal claims work, how the benefits work, and because I don't believe that they had ever had one. She certainly was involved and never involved with one.
And she had no clue how this would play out or what the benefits would be.
I don't think so.
And did she at that time ask you not to call Nancy Brophy immediately, to give her a few days before you guys reached out?
I think probably her and I discussed that, because usually I try to kind of get a feel maybe from the policyholder, like when would it be a good time to reach out. Sometimes maybe they want to talk to us right away. Sometimes they're not in a position to do that. So we probably discussed about timing.
Okay. And do you know whether before you talked to Nancy Brophy on June 8th, do your notes reflect whether there had been a conversation between Ms. Brophy and maybe somebody from OCI like Sherry Baker?
I'm sure that they talked, but I don't know if that was documented.
Okay. But when you talked on June 8th, you explained to Ms. Brophy that maybe a claim would be paid and maybe it wouldn't.
Right, that we couldn't make any guarantees.
Yeah. And that that no claim was going to be paid until you had a chance to investigate.
To
what
try
had
to gather
happened.
some additional information.
And as I'm looking at the SAFE notes, I get the sense that SAFE could have taken the route of not paying anything.
Correct.
Until the police had finished their investigation and told you what was going on.
So we typically don't pay any benefits until we make a decision, like formally accept the claim. So we just voluntarily decided to pay interim benefits given the circumstances.
But on June 8th, when you talked to Ms. Brophy, what you told her was that you just didn't know whether any monies were going to be paid.
Correct.
And that that it might be a long time before any monies were paid, if
Correct.
they were.
Correct.
And I think you testified that she told you that she had understood that the life insurance companies would not release any money until the police had finished their investigation.
Right, and that it could be a cold case.
And,
So
she expressed concern to you that if it was a cold case, those monies would never be paid.
correct. That, yeah,
That was
some
her
financial
worry.
concerns and worries.
Okay. And I know you testified about thank goodness the computer program figures things
Yes.
out.
Thank goodness.
At least for lawyers, workers' comp is considered a very niche-y kind of area of insurance and law.
Highly, highly regulated and
Yeah.
very complex.
Complex, misunderstood. And there are only a few people who have specialties to understand, a few kinds of lawyers who have specialty.
Yeah, they just practice work comp.
And who sells workers' comp?
Agents. So agents, you can get a work comp policy through an agent. You can get a work comp policy directly through SAFE. So
And is it considered casualty insurance? Do you know what kind of insurance it's considered?
well, it really is just considered workers' compensation insurance. So obviously, employers are required by law to carry it, and they can go to. There's multiple companies available in the state of Oregon. Some employers are self-insured, so they would get a policy typically through an agent, or they could do a direct write through SAFE if they decided that they wanted to go with SAFE as their carrier.
So if I just sold Medicare, could I then go sell some SAFE policies?
I'm not sure what kind of
License?
license the
Yeah.
agents have to get to. Typically, usually they're probably selling multiple lines of insurance,
Okay. But you don't know
I'm not sure.
how that licensing works. Fair enough. I don't either. We'll figure it out. So after you talked to her on June 8th, and then I think the next conversation you said June 18th.
I believe it was the 18th.
And I think on the 18th, she just told you that she had gone ahead and paid the funeral
Mhm.
costs herself.
Right, and she did ask about if I needed any documentation of that, and I said no, that
Okay.
we wouldn't need any documentation of that.
And you guys just left it that you would be back in touch with her, that the claim was just going to be deferred for a while and you'd be back in touch once
Correct.
that had sorted itself out.
Right.
So when you voluntarily, and I guess it was you and other people together, I'm not
Mhm.
putting this all on you, when you voluntarily decided to pay benefits, that wasn't anything she'd done to create that voluntary
No.
payment.
No,
That was just something you and others at SAFE had discussed.
our decision. Mhm.
Okay,
Based on the circumstances, we felt it was the right thing to do.
okay. But if you had not done that, this claim could still be pending if the case had not,
Correct.
okay. No further questions, thank you.
Okay.
Any redirect?
Yes, just one brief question for
Yes.
you. In that June 8th phone call, do you recall, did Ms. Brophy ask for a time frame for when the, specifically, I think it was the cremation payments could be made, and if that was going to be too long for her?
I don't remember if she asked about a timeline on the funeral costs, but I believe she asked the timeline on the claim, and technically we have 60 days to make a decision.
And did she express if that was a concern to her or a problem for her?
I don't remember.
If I show you a copy of your claim notes from Ms. Aiken's report, which is bait stamp page 861, will you review to yourself, not out loud,
Mm-hmm.
what is essentially the third paragraph down?
Mm-hmm.
And does
So-
that refresh your memory?
So yes, it looks like she did express, my notes say that I had mentioned the 60-day timeline, and she said she could not wait that long. And then I had said that if a claim is accepted, the full burial allowance would go to the state, since there would be no bill for us to pay a funeral home directly.
And did she later call you back and, or at some point later indicate that she understood that?
Yes, and I believe she had taken care of that bill herself.
And that's what you referred to earlier in that June 18th call?
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
All right, may this witness be excused?
Yes.
Wait, hold on a second, I want to hear.
You know, we have this witness under subpoena. And
Okay.
so-
Oh, okay. All right, so just to explain that, what that legalese means, you can step down for today, but you'll need to check with defense later to see if they're going to call you as a witness as well.
Okay, and will you be reaching out to me?
I'll do my best.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because I won't know unless you tell me.
Okay.
All right, okay.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you.
So, I know I said we'd go to 12:30, but unless the next witness is fairly quick, it might just make sense to break now. Is it a fairly quick
I
one?
believe she will be. I don't
Oh.
have very many questions for Ms. Aiken.
I have no idea, we'll see.
Okay, well, all right, well, we will stop at 12:30 because we need to have some time, but let's have the state's next witness.
The state will call Stephanie Aiken.
Okay. All right, if you can come on up and stand here in the witness box by the black chair, sort of close to the mic, but stay standing for just a minute while my clerk gives you enough.
Okay, I'll have you please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Then you may be seated and you may remove your mask. And because we're being recorded, I'll ask you to please state and spell your first and last name.
My name is Stephanie Aiken, Stephanie. Last name Aiken, Eakin.
Okay, and Ms. Aiken, there is water there if you wish to have any.
Thank
It's in
you.
the pitcher, sure. And whenever the state's ready.
Good morning, Ms. Aiken. How are you currently employed?
I've been at Safe Corporation for about 24 years.
And what is your role at SAFE?
So the first 21 years of my career, I was in our investigations division, and I did compensability and fraud investigations. And the last 3, I've been in supervision.
All right. So going backwards to June of 2018 or the summer of 2018, were you working then in that investigative capacity?
Yes.
And so what was your role? What did that generally look like?
So my job title is a fraud investigator at that time. And if there were claims that had red flags or any type of concerns, they would come and staff with me.
And so would it be the claims adjusters and perhaps some other people?
It could be investigators, supervisors, claims adjusters. Yes.
All right. And so were you involved back in the summer of 2018 or asked to conduct an investigation regarding the death of Daniel Brophy?
Yes. It was brought to my attention, yes.
Okay. And specifically the death claim in that case?
Correct.
And was part of the reason for your involvement in the nature of his death?
Correct.
And so do you remember about when you got involved? Was it right afterwards?
To my recollection, I believe it was September 6th of 2018.
All right, so you didn't get involved until after the payment of the claim had been stopped.
Well, it was, yes, the second payment was attempted to be stopped, yes.
Okay, that was unsuccessful, but future payments were stopped.
Correct.
Okay, and that was after the arrest of Mrs. Brophy.
Correct.
All right. And so as part of your responsibility then, you didn't have any direct contact with Ms. Brophy or any of what Ms. Alderson such or other adjusters did.
Correct.
But you were able to access all of their notes and sort of compile all that information?
Correct. That would be part of my responsibility, is to look at any investigations that were done up to that time, possibly connect with the field investigators, is what we call them, and then look at all the claim notes, payments, everything that would have had anything to do with that claim, yes.
All right. And so then is your job to kind of take that a step further, gather whatever information you can and so forth?
Yes, I gather all the information, I review it, and take further steps if necessary.
And in this particular case, I imagine at some point that was sort of paused because of the nature of what was going on. You completed, well, let me put it this way. You completed a report.
Yes, I completed a report, yes, I believe very soon after, if not the day after.
Okay. All right. And that report had several pages. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to hand you what I've marked as State's Exhibit 83.
Oh, it's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And do you recognize that piece of paper?
Yes, that is the first page of my report.
All right. And that's information that you compiled in total, kind of summarizing your report.
Correct.
All right. And it looks like State's Exhibit 83 covers, has two kind of amounts on there. One that's labeled as potential theft amount. Is that the amount that had been paid out so far?
Correct.
Okay, so what we heard, I think, was 2 payments, but really 3 months of payments.
Correct.
And then there's a potential attempted theft amount, so a total amount of money. What does that total represent?
That amount of $438,984.33 was a projection based on Mrs. Brophy's age at the time and her life expectancy. That would be put into a reserving system to anticipate the future payments if we were paying out fully on the claim.
Okay, and so that then, is that the amount that was generated by taking what the state's monthly designated amount, putting it in the system, looking at her age and projecting if she's to live a certain period of time, et cetera, this is how much we will pay?
Yes.
And I assume that's not a guarantee because you don't know how long someone will live or what might happen.
Yes.
Okay. But that's the projected amount that at least your company was assuming would be paid out.
Potentially, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'd offered State's Exhibit 83. And they gave us electronically. It's blank, so it's blank.
You know, I better look at that. Hang on one second.
All right, sure.
It looks like the one we got is blank, so.
Oh, all right.
Here I do have a matter for the court before this is admitted, and
Okay.
we can deal with it later.
Let me ask, is the matter such, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we have the jury break for lunch and we'll take up this matter. Let's have the jury back at 2 o'clock.
That's 2 o'clock?
Yes.
I will go ahead and.
And why don't you leave the record running? Yeah.
Okay, great. We will use the record running. I will take the jury.
Okay.
All rise for the jury.
Or, I mean, a whole bunch. That's right, yeah. 'Cause I did that for.
All right, everyone can be seated. Keeping in mind, I have not seen the exhibit. Go ahead, Ms. Maxfield.
May I just grab it again?
Yeah,
for
of course.
the court, my
Sure.
objections are. Your Honor, I wouldn't object to a redacted form, but, what this has is basically kind of summarizes it refers to this as an attempted theft. It talks about a compensatory fine. It talks about the location of the offense. What it's really talking about is the presumptive other bad act. And I would object to that portion. I don't object to the part that's relevant in this case, and that's the potential benefit. But the other commentary, whether a separate crime has been committed, I would object to.
All right, let me actually look at it. All right, so let me see if I understand the objection. There's in bold lettering, potential theft amount, and then also in bold, potential attempted theft amount. Is it that wording that you're objecting to, or I want to just make sure I understand which specific part of this you're objecting to?
I'm objecting to the potential theft. I'm objecting to the compensatory fine. I'm objecting to the phrasing offense.
Oh, date of offense.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And what would be, I'm just asking because you're also saying you don't object to the potential benefit. So what would be your suggestion on how that could be rephrased? Or did you say, I think you said you wouldn't object to a redacted form, is that
Yeah,
right?
and maybe we don't even need a form. I mean, if she's testified to the amount, and that's the critical issue that the jury needs to know. My objection is to the prejudicial comments and summarization of this claim.
All right, does the state want to, and if you want to look at this before responding, you can. I think I have the only copy.
We have copies.
All right, so what's the state's response?
Your Honor, if the court is inclined to suggest that we redact certain words, we can redact that. I think it's important. I mean, this is her investigative report. It's all of that's already been testified to, for one, without objection. And second, I think it's important to show both the amounts that were paid when the claim was, when the amounts that were paid, and the total benefit that Ms. Brophy was set to receive, or at least the projected benefit that she was set to receive. And that is why this document has all that information.
Your Honor, we don't accept police reports.
No, I understand. So let me ask this, and I don't think there has been any testimony yet about the compensatory fine request, so I'm not actually even sure what that is.
There hasn't been.
So is there going to be? I guess what I'm
No,
asking.
I wasn't going to elicit any.
Okay, so let me ask this, and I'm asking defense. If the words potential theft amount were redacted, and in lieu of that, the words amount paid thus far, or of, as of a certain date, whatever it is, and then if the words potential attempted theft amount were redacted, and it said total potential benefit, and then we just took out the whole part about compensatory fine request, and then rather than date of offense, just redacted of offense, and it said date. Would that meet your objection?
I think it would.
Okay, and did you need me to repeat all that?
No.
I mean, you'll know it when you see it.
That's true. So what we'll do before this ever goes to a jury, and after it's been modified over the lunch period, we'll take another look before the jury comes in just to see. Okay?
Thank
So
you.
let's do that. And let's take our break. And I guess for the attorneys, what I will say is it really doesn't make sense to have you back here much before 2. I think, though, to try to be efficient, let's have everyone back at 10 till 2. Hopefully we'll be done with our other matter before then, but I don't want to make you sit around and waste your time if we're not. So 10 till 2. All right, so you can step down for now and just be back ready to go at 10 till 2. Thanks.